A lot of people wonder why I don't carry around a smartphone. It's a strange thing not to have. I still have a phone. It's just that it's a very basic model and I only use it for calls or texts. I'm not even that old. Most figure I'm some kind of technophobe, but it's something different. My wife rolls her eyes every time she sees me making a call with it. She calls it my comfort brick. Meanwhile, she's checking out life hacks on TikTok. I've tried telling her about why I am this way a couple of times, but it's been hard to put into words. So in an effort to collect my thoughts, I'd like to tell the world about what happened to me a couple of years ago, and to an extent, what is happening still. I was working on my master's degree, but I was having a hard time finding something to write a paper about. I couldn't come up with a good subject, and time was running out. I managed to get a deadline extension, but only if I could present a suitable subject. I was about to give up when one of my professors suggested I talk to a man working in the private sector. He was a licensed physician who'd gone into private enterprise, but he was sure to have something interesting going on. I got in touch with him, and he asked me to come in the same day. Let's call him Solomon. Solomon and his team were working out of an honest-to-God laboratory. Most of their work revolved around medical hardware. So, they had sterile white rooms to protect sensitive electronics. Solomon was about 6'6" and balder than a bowling ball. He towered over his workers and had a very soft demeanor. He would calmly shake my hand and nod as I presented myself. I got the impression that he was a kind man. You notice that sort of thing. As I explained my situation, he made a suggestion. I'm working on a project called Liz. I can't share all the production details, but we collect a lot of data related to sleep. I could share that data for your paper. That was amazing news. I could easily do a study with that kind of data to back me up. I was scheduled to help Solomon and his team to collect test subject for his Liz project. It was simple enough. People were supposed to take a supplement before they went to sleep and use a headband to record their experience. It didn't matter if they slept long, short, or barely anything at all. Data was data. This was bulk collection. They'd already gone through about 20 iterations of the project, so this would be the 21st generation. I wasn't allowed to take part in the earlier versions, but I was going to get full access to the Generation 21 bulk data. There would be more than enough to cover a master's study on a related subject. I put up some posters around campus, and it didn't take long for people to sign up. A lot of folks wanted to get their foot in the door of the private sector. Having Solomon's name on a CV could be more than valuable than a quick payout. But they still got a symbolic sum as compensation for their trouble. As submissions started to roll in, Solomon brought something up. "Why don't you participate?" he said. "You could critique our methodology. We could separate your data if you think it would invalidate overall results, but I think it would grant some valuable insight." "You sure that'd be appropriate?" "Of course," he smiled. "You're already part of this. Might as well get your hands dirty." I had a hard time saying no. I wanted to, but I couldn't. So yeah, I signed up too. We ended up with 14 people in total. Some were medical students, others were dentists. There were even a couple of veterinarians. They were all invited in for a short presentation about the study and the various items they would be using. We were pressed into a cramped meeting room around an oval table with a projector, showing an out-of-focus presentation on a sun-stained canvas. Collection takes place over 2 weeks, Solomon explained, pointing to a calendar on the screen. This allows us to account for irregularities. No worries if you miss a day or two. We've taken that into account. He showed us the items again. There was a headband that was used to record our sleep. It looked like something an 80s tennis player might use. There was a cable to charge it during the day, The other item was a small bottle of gel capsules. This is a supplement to help us better record your experience. It does little to affect your sleep. We must insist that you take one about 10 minutes before you go to bed, 20 minutes if you had a big meal. Don't bite down on it or your mouth will taste like really crunchy salt. If you don't take it, don't bother with the headband. The data will be useless. It was a nondescript bottle, CMP5. It had a printed list of known side effects, but they were so generic that it might as well have been ibuprofen. There wasn't much more to it. We all got our kits, hid at home, and that was that. I started working on my paper, charged the headband, and went on as usual. When it was time to go to bed, I did as instructed. I took a capsule, I put the headband on, and set my alarm. The headband was surprisingly comfortable. It even had a massage and heating setting. It had a thicker side, meaning you could turn it slightly and use it as a sleep mask. That suited me perfectly, as I'd wanted one for a long time. I figured I'd ask Solomon if I could keep it when the study was over. Maybe in lieu of pay. The damn thing probably had Bluetooth speakers for white noise if I bothered to check. Going to sleep was surprisingly easy. I felt at peace. I had my alarm set, and there was no disruption, no loud noises, no background hum. Just the slight saltiness of the capsule on my tongue. What's stayed with me all these years is what I dreamt on that first night. It was one of the clearest, most memorable dreams I've ever had. Not because it was amazing, but because it seemed so real. It was the first time I ever had a lucid dream, as in knowing I was sleeping. I dreamt I was at my old middle school, back in South Dakota. I walked down the hallway looking at all the pictures we'd put up. Most of the drawings just looked like math scribbles, but every now and then you'd see something you recognized. A happy farmer, someone's dog, a sunflower, but the wrong color, mostly blue. It was all so real. The slate stone texture of the floor, the soundproofed ceiling tiles that you could stick pens in if you flicked them hard enough. The wide hallways allowing students to run up and down while leaving a lane for teachers down the middle. The welcome mat outside our homeroom. I remembered the font. I dreamt about some people I hadn't thought about in years. I could see my teacher at her desk grading papers. There was a globe in the window with plenty of grubby hand marks surrounding the continental US. Whenever someone went on a holiday trip, they were allowed to put a pin on the globe to show where they were going. I ran a hand across my old desk, feeling the notches bump against my nails. Then the speaker system crackled. I turned to see my teacher sit up straight. She looked at me and spoke in unison with the announcer. Lima, India, Sierra. I took a few steps closer. She kept eye contact with me. She was still grading papers with her right hand, turning the page without looking away. Lima, India, Sierra. Someone walked past in the hallway. I could hear chatter in the background of the PA system. Some of the pictures on the wall looked funny. One of the drawings had the number 21 on it. Lima, India, Sierra. She turned her attention back to the papers, and I could feel my blood run cold. Something was wrong. Something has irreversibly changed. I turn around, and I see something, someone, and in a heartbeat, I woke up screaming. I threw the headband across the room, jumped out of bed, and I was wide awake. I'd only slept for 3 hours, but my heart was pounding out of my chest. I sprinted into the bathroom, washing my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror, only to see that I'd been crying. My face was red and puffy. I had to sit in my bed for a while, holding the headband. I was shaking with adrenaline, waiting to find the peace to go back to sleep. It took me the better part of an hour. I didn't use the headband as a sleep mask after that. I just wore it as intended. I got a couple more hours, but it was a dreamless sleep. I scheduled a call with Solomon the next morning. I was halfway through a cheese and ham sandwich when he called me. I still had a stubborn cowlick that wouldn't go away, making me look like something out of a cartoon on a video call.
First night,
Solomon said.
How'd it go?
I'm gonna be honest, not so great.
Nightmares, huh?
I wasn't prepared for him to admit it so openly. Before I could say anything, he cut me off.
It's not uncommon. In fact, it's very helpful. We have more data than we need of people just sleeping. But nightmares? We don't have a lot of that. They're much more valuable to us.
How did you know I had one?
It's very common.
He continued.
Some get nightmares. Some get a sense of claustrophobia. Others just don't use the headband at all and call it quits after a couple of nights.
If this is what it feels like, I get it. It was awful.
Do you want to quit the study?
I thought about it. I wanted to, but I couldn't afford to step off now. I had a paper to write, and I hadn't gotten access to the data yet. Chances were, if I were to abandon the project, I'd be shit out of luck. I swallowed my fears and shook my head. No, I'm okay, I said. But I got a question. What's Lima, India, Sierra?
That's just an activation phrase, Liz. It comes from the headband as a synchronization signal, sort of like when you snap a clapperboard on a movie set.
Is it dangerous? Solomon chuckled a little.
It's just information.
The next night, I was hesitant about going to bed. I drank some milk, got ready, and spent a full hour scrolling on my phone. I was hoping to get so tired that I didn't care anymore. But it was difficult. I got the impression that if nightmares were valuable data, maybe Solomon induced them. Maybe that's what the pill did. When I finally went to sleep, I was so tired I couldn't keep my eyes open. And once again, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. My high school gymnasium completely empty. Every footstep echoed. Walls were decorated with images of important milestones. Then, at some point, it started again. Not the PA system this time, but just the omnipresent voice, as if spoken by the walls themselves. Lima, India, Sierra. I remembered what happened last time I heard it. I spun around looking for a solution. I was aware that I was in a dream, so I tried to think in terms of dream logic. Maybe I could hide? Lima, India, Sierra. I found this old speaker that was big enough for me to hide behind. I crawled in, closing my hiding space with a wooden panel. Lima, India, Sierra. Quiet. The tension lifts, and I can feel myself getting lighter. Something gently tugs at my wooden panel. I resist, but I don't have a good grip. It pulls, and I pull back. A moment of silence. The panel is ripped from my hands. I see 2 feet dangling in the air in front of me as something attacks. I fall out of bed, coughing and clutching my chest. I'm crying, and I'm having trouble breathing from the snot covering my face. I'm a wreck, and I've only just woken up. I got about 4 hours of sleep that night. This would go on for a couple of nights. I was a wreck. But I had studies to take care of. I still went to class. I still worked on my paper. And I had a cheap cheese and ham sandwich in the cafeteria at lunch every day. This one time, as I sat down for lunch, I noticed I wasn't the only one yawning. Not that unusual, but I recognized a person across from me. It was one of the other people who'd signed up for Solomon's study. She was about my age, but in a different field. I could tell she was struggling too. People don't usually chuck 2 Red Bulls for lunch. I got up and walked over to her. You're in Solomon's study, right? Yeah? She put her half-drunk can of Red Bull up to her temple, cooling her head. Mind if I join you? Knock yourself out. She introduced herself as Norma, Midwestern gal. Started her studies later in life than most of us. She had the appearance of someone who could possibly cook one hell of a chili. Trouble sleeping? I asked, nodding to her energy drinks. Yeah, how about you? Same. We sat there for a moment, exchanging a couple of pleasantries. I was doing my master's thesis. She was about to start an internship. I hear this phrase, I said. Whenever I hear it, I know it's about to get bad. She looks up, nodding enthusiastically. We say it at the same time. Lima, India, Sierra. Her eyes light up. Yes, she exclaims. That's it. I hear that one thing, and then he's just there. Exactly, I say, then pause. Wait, who's there? You know, the person, thing, with the seam? What? It's like a person, but with like a seam down the middle. Maybe it's just me. The following night, I try to look a little closer. I go into my dream with a mission to gather information. Not only am I unusually aware of myself dreaming, but I also look closer at the environment. That time, I was at the beach. A childhood memory. I could see my sister and mother swimming in the shallows. My father was there too, leaning back in a sun chair with a book. Then he turned to me, looking up over the pages. Without missing a beat, he turned a page and spoke aloud. Lima, India, Sierra. And he repeated it over and over. And while the others played, like I remembered, I was spinning around and looking for whatever Norma had been talking about. As I did, I noticed little details in the background. One of the billboards had changed text. Initial contact, 2 hours, 41 minutes, 18 seconds. After Dad repeated those same words for the third time, I felt a sense of calm, then terror. I spun around, looking every which way, only for something to change. I got a glimpse of someone pale, floating in mid-air. Someone humanoid, but the head looked a bit bulbous. It didn't move its arms, just its vibrating chest. Then I was awake. I didn't notice the transition until I gasped for air. I started having lunch with Norma regularly. We would share our experiences and discuss what we'd seen. For example, I shared the strange billboard text. She, on the other hand, had seen something similar. I dreamt about my high school graduation, she said, but my diploma looked like an email. An email? What did it say? I couldn't read it all before it got to me, but there was an address. She handed me a slip of paper. I almost choked on my sandwich. It was Solomon's private email, the one I'd been handed by a professor when I first reached out to him. He didn't give this out to just anyone. I double-checked my phone and showed her it was the same. That don't make sense, she mumbled. How can anything from a dream be real? There were more dreams, and every time, I would get little glimpses. I would be someplace familiar, and at some point, I would hear those damn words. It could be bird chirping in the window, a TV running in the background, a ringtone, an alarm clock, a passing car. There was always something. Lima, India, Sierra. Then something would happen. Something would attack. I usually saw it just before I woke up. For example, its fingers were tightly webbed. They couldn't flex. Also, it wasn't just pale. It was a light touch of green, like dry grass. And in every way I saw it, its feet never touched the ground. I would wake up screaming, crying, or falling out of bed. One time, I was already standing up before I knew I was awake. I would feel so bad about going to bed that I'd end up staying up way too late, just making things worse. I tried to tell myself that this whole thing was on a timer, and that by the end, I'd have secured a future. But it was hard to keep appearances up. My lunches with Norma later extended to others in the same study. I guess Solomon hadn't counted on us all going to the same cafeteria. There was Elmer, Candace, Joseph, Pat, and Misha. Everyone had a similar experience. Elmer swore that the thing didn't have a face. Candace said it looked like it hung in the air, like a propped-up scarecrow. Joseph said it was bald, like Solomon. Pat said it never moved. It just appeared in mid-air. Misha, on the other hand, barely said anything at all. He hated just thinking about the damn thing. Norma was adamant about what she'd seen. The thing had a seam down the middle, but you could only see it when it got really close, kinda like the spine of a leaf. And we all knew that just before waking up. It did something sudden and dangerous, but we never remembered what. I think it was Candace who came up with the name, Floating Man. It was as good a description as any. But more than that, it was strangely consistent. We could all see the same thing, no matter the environment. How could a single image resonate through several people at once? How can you share a dream? I remember us all sitting there, long after we'd finished our meals. No one knew what to say. What we'd experienced was unheard of. Even if one could induce a nightmare, it was unprecedented to have a single shared image, especially one that was so clear. "I think it's the pills," I said. "I don't think they're supplements. I think they're causing this." "You think so?" Norma asked. Solomon kinda hinted at it. He said having nightmares is valuable data. Everyone at the table groaned. It made sense. A bunch of underpaid students being used as guinea pigs. "Could be some kind of mild Parkinson drug," Elmer suggested. "Dopamine agonists." "You really think they'd slip us something like that?" Joseph asked. "That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." "Unless it was in the fine print," Candace added. "Or it's something milder like SSRIs." "We should try something," I suggested. "What if, for just one night, we skip the pill? If we still get nightmares, it's the headband. If it's the pill, we can have it tested." It was an experiment. We liked experiments. We exchanged numbers and started a group chat to keep each other updated on our progress. I felt good going to bed that night. Either way, I was going to wake up the next day with some answers. I willfully picked up the bottle of capsules, rattled it, and whacked a finger. "Not tonight, fuckers." I put on some music, crawled into bed, and put the headband on. I checked in with the others. Some had already gone to bed. Others were still psyching themselves up. Norma was admittedly nervous. This whole thing would be a strange blip in the data, for sure. But Solomon had already said he'd accounted for that. One day here and there wasn't all that bad. When I finally fell asleep that night, I felt confident. I didn't even realize I was asleep at first. It felt like closing my eyes and opening them again. But when I opened them, I was somewhere else. It was this shopping mall my mom and I used to go to when I was a kid. Most of the stores were still stocked with early 2000s fashion, and a handful of passers-by mirrored that. I could see my mother on a bench, enjoying a soft surf. I walked around a little, feeling my confidence fade. Something was different this time. It was still one of those vivid dreams, but something felt wrong. A man in a stall turned his attention to me, looking across the hall. "Lima." I sighed. It was going to happen, pill or not. It had to be the headband. I knew a comp sci guy. He could probably look into how the hell that thing worked. I sat down, resigning myself to another scare. A woman walking out of a clothing store turned her head towards me while still walking the other way, speaking in a conversational tone. "India." Looking around, I could sense something was off. There were other conversations happening. There was this young couple sitting at a juice bar, for example. They were having a conversation, but it didn't make any sense. They were lovingly looking into each other's eyes, as one said, "Induction stabilized. Engagement in approximately 300 feet. The other kissed her hand and responded, Suppressor offline. Residual effectiveness 65%. Then they both turned to me, their faces slack. Sierra. I looked around. They returned to the conversation. One of them would say a number, then the other would say a lower number. They would be counting down, but not like a clock. It took me a moment to realize they were talking about distance. 200 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet. Attention shoppers. A speaker crackled. All systems nominal. 40 feet, 30 feet. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. Why was this feeling different? I stepped out of the open, pressing my back up against the store window. They were still speaking, and the number were going down, but there was nothing for me to see. It had to be behind me. I turned around, but there was only a store mannequin, a blank, featureless face, slumped shoulders, and as I looked a little closer, it had a seam down the middle of its body. Something smacked into my chest. I felt a piercing pain as I was flung backwards, knocking over the table the two lovers were using. They just stood back up, ignoring me completely. I touched my shoulder, only to feel real physical pain. There was blood on my hand. I wasn't waking up. The floating man had something moving in his chest as the seam closed. It pushed through the glass of the store window, moving through it without breaking it. I could hear a rhythmic pitter-patter as something solid touched the tiled floor. This thing wasn't just floating. It was more like it was being held up. And it was still coming for me. I ran up the escalator, passing an old woman as I went. She looked at me, shaking her head. Damage assessment. Moderate. I didn't have time to think. Even then and there, my shoulder ached. I could feel the pain through my body. Looking back down, I could see the floating man coming closer, always a couple of inches off the ground, not flying across the room. I hurried past the hot dog stand. The text on the front made me pause. Lima, India, Sierra. I pushed the cart aside, hoping it would slow down whatever was coming my way. I passed a poster on the wall listing timestamps along with initials. It sort of looked like the way we structured bulk data. Was information from the study leaking into my nightmare? I hurried into the bathroom. There was another man there, washing his hands. I rushed into a stall, locked the door, and climbed up on the toilet. It took some effort to climb up, as it really felt like I'd been pierced through the shoulder. The nerve damage alone was enough to make my eyes water, and I had trouble staying quiet. I closed my eyes as hard as I could and bit my lip, hoping to distract myself from the pain. I didn't hear any doors open, just the pitter-patter of something taking careful steps. Then, the man washing his hands stopped and spoke. Cortisol spike. Engagement in 3, 2, 1. A blank face passed straight through the stall door. I screamed as it pressed its chest against me. The floating man was so close that it could almost be a hug, making me look over its shoulder and past it. There was something behind it, something holding it up, like a puppet. The seam in its chest opened. I tried pushing it back, only to have my hand pierced by a bone-like protrusion. It went straight through the back of my hand, right below my left ring finger. It retracted and prodded again, lopping off the top of my middle finger entirely. It plopped against the floor tiles like I'd dropped a piece of sausage. I've never felt anything like that. Never. It wasn't just pain. It was a constant throbbing, nerve-searing pain. I braced myself against the back of the stall and kicked, pushing this thing out through the door. It gave me enough space to get out, turn a quick left and run. I could feel it closing in as the pitter-patter followed. I got out of the bathroom, but I was bleeding profusely. It was only then that it hit me. I was lightheaded. How the hell can you be lightheaded in a dream? What happens when you fall asleep in a dream? What if you pass out? What if you die? I ran past the poster on the wall with timestamps. Some of the lines were crossed out. Making my way back into the main hall, I stood in the middle of the crowded mall, doing the only thing I could bring myself to. I screamed for help. I'm standing there bleeding from my shoulder and hand, screaming for help. And all I see are these neutral faces turning my way. 190 BPM, adrenaline spiking. I kept screaming, but no one did anything. And from around the corner, I see the floating man. I close my eyes, scream and tear at my face, begging myself to just wake the fuck up. For a brief moment, I managed to force my eyes open. I'm in my bed. I'm so sweaty that the sheets are sticking to me. I try to speak, but it just turns into a moan. My mouth is wide open and cotton-like, and I have no sense of control over my body. I'm not awake, but I'm not asleep. I flop my arm to the side, only to see blood on my hand. I try to force myself to move, to get out of bed, but nothing happens. I can hear myself snoring as my eyes start drifting downward. My eyes close, and I'm back. But it's somewhere new. It's a traffic jam on the highway, a late afternoon, probably a memory. Someone is honking, and we're miles away from the closest exit. As soon as I can move, I get out of my car and I go on foot. I pass by car after car. Then I stop. Something tickles my mind. I look a little closer at one of the cars, only to see Candace. She's leaning back in her seat. Something has torn through her chest, breaking her rib cage wide open. There's blood on the windshield. I try to convince myself that it's a dream. I say it out loud. I say it like a mantra. And as I do, her body slumps to the side, her eyes fixed on me. Lima. I shake my head. I run as fast as I can, and despite it all being a dream, I can feel my thumping chest. Why is there still pain in my hands? Why is my shoulder still bleeding? I pass by a car with an open window. The driver fans themselves with a newspaper as a radio host speaks.
India.
I keep saying no, like there is someone there to listen. I put my hands over my ears, hoping it will stop if I just don't hear it. I close my eyes as hard as I can. And when I open them, I see a license plate. Sierra. I dive under a car as something breaks a window behind me. I'm almost crushed as an immense weight steps down on the car above me, but I manage to get out with just a sprained foot. I see the shadow of the floating man in the late afternoon sun. I pull on a door and get inside a random car, only for that blank face to pass straight through the passenger side window. Something grabs me by the chest and close and pull me through the door like it was made of paper. A door is between me and the floating man, and something slams against it. I'm dropped on the asphalt like a wet towel. I try to get back on my feet, but I'm not fast enough. I pick the door up and wield it like a shield as something slams into it, over and over. I can see a sharp bone pierce through, just inches away from me. I push back as the door is ripped from me. I'm wide open, and this thing is just a couple of feet away. I'm bleeding, limping, and wheezing for air. I step back, but I can tell I won't be fast enough. Not this time. The seam of its body opens all the way from the top of its head to the crotch. The floating man separates into two separate pieces as something reveals itself. There's a presence behind it, holding the two pieces up like a hand puppet. I can't tell what I'm really looking at. 6, maybe 8 legs, 2 halves of what looks like a human body hanging from 2 front limbs. Mimicry to keep you looking where it wants. And there's a head, a circular set of eyes arranged in something resembling a mix of honeycomb and the seed pod of a flesh-like lotus. It's drifting as dozens of bones poke in and out of would-be eyes. and it descends on me, unfolded, primal and hungry. I wake up, but I'm not breathing. I've fallen out of bed, accidentally losing my headband. I'm on the floor, having knocked the air out of my lungs. I'm bleeding. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I try to get up, but I'm limping. How can my foot hurt from a dream? I still can't breathe. I count 20 seconds. I get to the bathroom and topple over the sink. It cracks and falls, sending me to the ground. A piece of ceramic bumps against my chest, and something dislodges from my throat. I spit out a piece of cartilage, bloody and raw. As I lay on the bathroom floor, I can hear my phone exploding with messages and missed calls. I knew it was bad. I knew it. But for a moment, I just drew in breath and thanked whatever God may be to finally truly be awake. I couldn't speak, but I managed to call for help. Doctors would later explain that I had severe damage to my windpipe. I had several burst blood vessels, most of which were concentrated around my arm, stomach, and shoulder. They thought I'd fallen down a flight of stairs. They did not accept the explanation that it all happened in my sleep. It was impossible. The body can't self-destruct like that. When I got a chance to catch up with my messages and calls, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd gotten hurt. Norma was in surgery. Pat had a broken leg. Candace wasn't even answering. We'd later find out she'd died in her sleep. They couldn't find any connection. The pills we took were just a mineral supplement. The headband was flashy lights, a speaker, some electrodes, and a memory card. Nothing malicious. I ended up staying in the hospital overnight. Before I left the next day, I had a surprising visitor. No one came to announce him, and no one prepared me. He walked right in. Solomon. I was still in bed, and he sat down next to me. He almost looked apologetic. "You alright?" he asked. I shook my head, pointing to my throat. He said, nodding. "Sorry, we've been adamant about people taking the suppressor pill, but we had no idea Liz was effective enough to." He paused himself, shook his head, and smiled. He looked excited. "I mean, you had some residual effects. You were technically still protected, and it still managed to do all this. Can I see?" He stepped closer, and I held up an arm, shielding myself. With my other hand, I buzzed for a nurse. Sorry, I'm just curious. This is a great development. We've got enough to get started on the next phase. I am more than thankful, and I want you to know that." Solomon got up, heading for the door before a nurse could get there. He looked back a final time. "It really is just information. And information is so much cheaper than, say, a missile." Despite it all, Solomon was true to his word. I got a great recommendation. I finished my master's paper, and I could put my work on his project on my CV. I don't even know why, but mentioning I worked on the liminal intrusion system, LIS, has opened all kinds of doors. Private sector, government, I could take my pick. Candace passed away in her sleep. Norma tried to look into it, but all signs pointed to a brain aneurysm. None of us who skipped out on the pill that night was spared. The study was called off, not because it was deemed the cause, but because they got all the data they were looking for. I've come a long way in my career since then. Solomon is still active, and his team have come a long way since they had to use headbands. I think they solved their visual transmission problems. Wouldn't surprise me if all they need is lights now. That's why I don't use a phone anymore. I know what they're capable of doing. I know that if I step too far out of line or say something I'm not supposed to, I could go to sleep one night and never wake up. And the worst thing is, I'd know it's coming. I just need to hear those 3 words, and I know It's happening. Lima, India, Sierra.
When I was 11, my mother bought me a telescope from a novelty store. It was old, about 10 or so years maybe, slightly rusted from time, but never used. The next night, I went out to a small field and used it to gaze into the sky. The moment the reflected lights of the planets shined into my eyes was the moment I knew what I wanted to do. Our twin sister, Venus, so alike and yet more different than we could have ever imagined. Jupiter, the titanic guardian of the inner planets, morphing the system around it. Saturn, with her beautiful and luscious rings that envelop her sky. Mercury, a small and rapid rock that was closer to the light than anyone on Earth could withstand. And most of all, Mars, the red planet, a fearsome, war-born neighbor, and what would be the next step on humanity's path to the stars. I knew with just one look that I wanted to help guide us on that path. I've been working at NASA for over 15 years now, and in that time, I've seen dozens of proposals for a manned landing on Mars. Hundreds of people spent weeks at a time discussing the engineering process behind designing a craft capable of carrying out the task of transporting mankind back and forth between the two planets. Millions of dollars poured into projects that never came to light. And for the longest time, the problem was that we simply couldn't feasibly land someone on the planet and then help them return home safely. In part, that was one of the reasons we launched the Mars exploration rovers. If you don't know, I'll go over it briefly. The MER was a mission that involved launching 2 rovers to explore the surface of Mars. And the 2 were named Spirit and Opportunity. They would be the successor to the prior Sojourner rover. The data collected thanks to the MER is invaluable, and at any other time, I would love to divulge them. They were only planned to last 90 days, but the guys back in engineering seriously put in some effort. They lasted longer than they should have after arriving in early 2004. For most of the mission, it wasn't too special. We gathered as much data as we could, had the rovers explore their surroundings, mine up rocks sometimes. Nothing too special to write home about, unless you're really interested in Martian minerals. Officially, Spirit's mission ended after getting struck in a sandpit in 2009, losing all power the year later, and the mission declared completed after another year. This is partially true. Spirit really did lose her power after she got stuck. It's partially our fault. She had fallen into a slight dip in the ground, and the risk of falling deeper was huge. We assumed it was a sandpit and acted like we always had. But alas, someone suggested brightening it. It was still near total darkness. But in the corner, there were two very distinct red dots aimed directly at the camera. We couldn't shake how much they looked like eyes. Apart from that, the cavern was slightly visible, appearing to be a vastly different location than we had last seen. Spirit must have moved significantly, but where to, and more importantly how, is something I'm still not entirely sure of. Most of the attention was drawn to the red, glowing dots. This wasn't necessarily proof of anything. There are several possible answers for what they could be. The camera might have detected large pieces of dust, and due to the quality loss of brightening, it appeared much rounder than it really was. It could be a reflection of the rover's lights on the cave wall. That's the answer we settled on. But I knew something was off. I think my colleagues did too. This was the last we've received from Spirit. We stopped trying to communicate with her. We had more important things to put our focus on, namely the remaining rover, Opportunity and Curiosity, who was to be launched in November. I've always considered Opportunity and Spirit to be twins, brother and sister with the shared purpose of propelling humanity into the future, taking after their eldest brother, Sojourner. I was still studying when Sojourner was active, but I can try and dig around for information on him sometime later. But I'm getting off track. Opportunity is much the star of the MER. He lasted for over 15 years on the harsh Martian landscape, powering through dust, rock, and time with the passionate hearts of 7 billion people behind him. Oppie, as he came to be called, was, for a few months, the only active rover until Curiosity's arrival in 2012. Although not as focused on the subject of life as his younger sibling, he still provided invaluable information. I've never been more proud of a little rover in my life than I was of this little guy. Without his twin, Oppie had to function alone, even if only for a short period. Still, I didn't want him to feel alone without Spirit. I'd dedicate her memory to him. Oppie's mission officially came to a halt 2 years ago. A severe dust storm had sent him into hibernation, a sleep from which he would never awake. Last February, we stopped trying to awaken him and bid farewell to Opportunity. That's the official story, and unlike Spirit, it's much further than the truth, and there's a damn good reason for keeping it secret. Although he was supposed to be in hibernation during the storm, Oppie would occasionally send back information about odd, seemingly volcanic rocks. This was obviously startling, and not just because the rover was somehow operating during hibernation. Where he was stationed, Oppie wasn't in range of any volcanic fixtures. The only way he could be sending this data was if he somehow reactivated during the storm, and if a group of volcanic rocks just so happened to have been pushed by the winds close enough for him to reach. Needless to say, the chances of that occurring are slim to none. Knowing the media panic that ensued from the implication, all of this was quickly classified. Opportunity would officially be declared as inoperative and would remain that way until further notice. Unofficially, research continued. The same team that worked with Spirit after she fell into that cave was assembled to investigate this mystery, myself included. Oppie would still carry out the tasks instructed of him, and as such, an image was requested. In response, he sent back an almost natural photo of the Martian landscape. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except for the rocks.
Lying on the ground next to his wheels were 6 perfectly cut hexagonal prisms made out of what looked to be obsidian. Lowering the camera and taking another photo, markings were discovered on the objects. Unnervingly, they were all facing the screen and perfectly aligned at that. The markings on the objects were strange, to say the least. They resembled hieroglyphics in a way, yet they remained distinctly different. What felt especially eerie was that they resembled the sigils Spirit had found years prior. Scanning them gave us the exact same data Oppie was sending us during the storm. Normally, in a scientific situation, we try to take things logically. The reason we don't accept aliens did it as a solution to every mystery we encounter in space is that, in science, our goal is to find a natural explanation behind all observed phenomena. And in all situations we find ourselves in, there is one. Our goal is to find it. There was nothing explainable nor natural about this. Still, assuming we had just discovered alien life, they should have left traces of something when interacting with objects that would have been picked up by Oppie during his scans. If Opportunity was the one who placed the objects, that also doesn't make sense. The rocks weren't there before the storm, and the wheels are much too slow for Oppie to have somehow found them and returned them to his location. Besides that, why would he behave in this way? He had to be instructed to do this by something we were somehow unable to detect, something that came during the storm. After a short debate, we instructed Oppie to pick up each prism and photograph it individually in hopes of possibly understanding what they were supposed to be. Multiple theories started up in the control room, quickly diverting attention. Assuming it was genuinely alien life, it is way too deliberate to have been an accident. Whatever alien life did this would be at least moderately intelligent. Maybe it was trying to greet us. But if that's the case, why like this? If it's aware we're watching, then why doesn't it show itself? The debates continued as Opportunity sent back photographs. Taking a break from the conversation, I briefly looked at the screen and immediately froze. The most recent image was of the second prism. Almost nothing unusual about that. But in the very far distance of the screen stood something. It was almost impossible to see behind all of the dust. I couldn't make out much of anything regarding the figure's appearance. I chalked it up to maybe being one of the other prisms, and the angle had made it appear further away. The third image disproved that. The figure was visibly closer this time, but still difficult to make out. From where it was shot, it was obvious whatever I was looking at was humanoid. It was rather short, about the size of a teenager. I took a moment, then waited for the fourth image. When it arrived, I nearly took a step back. At that point, it was clear that whatever this was, it had to be some sort of a creature, and it was making its way toward Oppie. They were much easier to see, judging by the sudden halt in chatter around me. They were hunched over, standing on jagged and clawed feet. A glimmer of red could be seen glaring at the camera. The same crimson shade captured by Spirit in her last photograph. Equally red teeth could be seen in the beast's maddened grin, lined around a long snout. It had several large protrusions emerging from the back of its head, almost like tentacles in the form of hair.
Hanging above its head were two very long tails, seemingly longer than the creature was tall, sharp thorns covering them like razor wire. I wasn't afraid of its appearance. I was afraid that whatever this thing was, it was walking on the surface of Mars with apparently no issue. I was afraid of the malice in its eyes. I can't describe what it felt like. They pierced down into my soul, racking my heart with fear until it pounded uncontrollably, as if it was ready to burst from its cage. It didn't feel like it was looking at the rover, nor the camera. It felt like it was looking at us. It couldn't be. It couldn't know. Even if it was aware that the rover could see, it couldn't possibly know what Oppie's purpose is, and it certainly couldn't predict when the images are taken. The data transmission takes 6 minutes total, from when the order is sent to when it is received, and my heart stopped. The images were 3 minutes old. We were looking at the past. The creature was already at the rover. Before I could even react to the realization, the screen flickered to what should have shown the fifth prism. Instead, the camera was tilted over to face the creature, whose claws were wrapped around Oppie's body. Animosity filled its scornful gaze. The crimson red that outlined its eyes and teeth took on a new hue, the same as the red rocks of Mars. From the height of the photo, the creature must have been lifting Oppie. The sixth image was never received. Opportunity never responded to any of our communication attempts after it sent that picture. As far as anyone here knows, the creature destroyed the rover, leaving curiosity alone on the barren surface. Obviously, it was very quickly decided that none of this would become public. Internally, we were a mess afterwards. It was undeniable proof of alien life, which we had searched so long to find. And yet, while nobody could say why, it was more unnerving than exciting. We expected microbes, not an animal, let alone an intelligent one. That's what gets me the most. The way its eyes locked into mine. There's nothing I can say that could possibly describe the feeling of abject hatred in that beast's eyes. That wasn't instinct. It was malice. It hated humanity. And it hated Earth. And it wanted us to know that. Despite how horrifying the ordeal felt, I kept my composure as best as I could and assisted in the cover-up. I don't think I abandoned my morals, nor do I think that NASA did the wrong thing by hiding this. Hell, even now, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing by telling you all. The discovery of life on another planet should be one of excitement, not dread. That's what I wanted people to feel when we made the announcement. And so, the true fate of opportunity remained in the shadows. I know a few people who try to go public about it, posting online, telling friends and family. Nobody believed them, and NASA knew that. No, they're not dead in a ditch somewhere. There's not a lot of people with the education and expertise necessitated for our means. And besides, it'd be more suspicious if they did end up in a ditch. They did get one hell of a pay cut though, that's for sure. So why am I finally telling you all about this? Sure, there's no risk to my life. And hey, they can cut my pay in half, and I'll still be making more than the average family. But I supported them, helped them cover this, and I even sympathize with their reasoning. Well, it's because of what I saw last week. Due to the quarantine, I've been spending all of my time here at base, monitoring Curiosity search. Everything was going well, nothing out of the ordinary, until that Saturday. It was almost midnight when I noticed it. There it was, in the most recent photograph. Just sitting there, tauntingly, 6 hexagonal prisms, each turned towards Curiosity. The creature I had seen, that we had all seen and chose to deny. It sat atop a large rock, glaring into the camera with a tilted head. Its eyes and muzzle burrowed into a mocking expression. I could almost hear it sneer. Most everyone else was asleep or had left, so the decisions came down to me. I just stood there, dumbfounded. This couldn't be the same creature. It just couldn't be. Curiosity is thousands of kilometers from opportunity. How could it have traveled that distance on foot? I knew by all logic it had to be a different member of the same species. But something in its eyes, the purely crimson dots, it told a different story. They were the same. I saw them through spirit's eyes. I saw them through Oppie's. Hesitating and shaking, I sent a photo request and waited for the 6 long minutes for a response. I was greeted by the sight of the creature, grinning maniacally. It was gesturing to the ground beneath its feet. Standing there were the prisms, the clearest shot of all 6 at once, the sigils inscribed on their faces as visible as the hatred in the beast's soul. I've still yet to decode what they mean. I requested one more image on the off chance that Curiosity was spared destruction. What I saw is why I've finally broken my vow of secrecy. It's why I'm telling you all this. Hell, it's why I might spill everything I can find. Knowing this thing existed on the Red Planet, how intelligent it was, and how scornful of man it seemed to be. That alone horrified me to want to forget the beast. It had crawled from the depths of insanity, the core of the planet of war itself. One single soldier, capable of tearing through the strongest alloys we could construct. Just one. And in the last photo, there were thousands. If only I knew what kind of fucked up rabbit hole I was crawling into when I first saw those things on Mars. Well, when you enter this kind of work, you acknowledge that you're not getting out of it. You don't just leave the world of astronomy after discovering all its wonders. No, when you enter that world, you become part of it. A piece of an ever-growing puzzle. Astronomy is a science that becomes your kin. I've seen things I wish I hadn't. But I can't quit my quest to understand, to discover all that the universe has to offer. When I became an astronomer, when I accepted this position 17 years ago, I understood that it was something I would hold to for the rest of my life. Now that it's led me to what it has, there really is no turning back. Right from the get-go, what I thought was the discovery of extraterrestrial life on another planet was merely another encounter with it. The earliest I can trace the first sighting of the creatures dates back to 1971. Unfortunately, that was in a landing by the Soviets, and trying to sift through their files has led me nowhere so far. I'm left in the dark when it comes to that. Apart from the knowledge that the Soviets were aware of life on Mars decades before Spirit and Opportunity made history. How they did, I'll get into that. But for now, I will keep trying to uncover what I can.
Unfortunately, the collapse of the Soviet Union makes this monumentally more difficult. Now, on to what we at NASA have found. Despite what I thought, Sojourner had no encounters with the Martians. Rather, our first meeting was with the Mars Surveyor program in 1998. NASA launched 2 spacecraft that year, an orbiter and a lander. The official story is that the Mars Polar Lander lost contact upon descent, and the Mars Climate Orbiter crashed into the planet due to an error in which the craft utilized imperial seconds. As you can expect by now, this is far from the truth. Lander continued communications for at least 17 hours, and although most records are scrubbed, I found a mostly uncensored report. I'm not sure who recorded it. I've never seen them before, but it contains the bulk of information on Lander. Here's the transcript. This is going on record. The Mars Surveyor program has encountered unexpected interference. Touchdown occurred at roughly 2012 UTC on December 3rd. The lander failed to establish communications for 34 minutes before successful interactions occurred. Imager showed the location to be vastly different than anticipated. The lander made contact with a deep thin crater that led into a cavern. Probes failed to respond. No data was collected via lander. Object instead lifted by unseen force. Lander ceases communication for the next 23 minutes. Upon return, an image of a shrine was sent. Shrine appeared ritualistic in nature and was carved out of an unknown material, likely obsidian. The video pauses then to show the photo. The molded material and the sigils inscribed into it reminded me all too well. A thick layer of some strange viscous yellow liquid was smeared on the shrine. I couldn't see any Martians in the frame, but I knew they were there. Second photo shows an unidentified figure, standing at approximately 312 centimeters tall, maintaining a slender frame. Analysis from the biological department has concluded that the figure is an animal of reptilian descent. There it is. There it fucking is. Staring right at the camera, grinning with sadistic glee. The next 2 frames are simply clearer shots of both the Martian and the shrine. Whatever kind of fucked up religion they had, they were dedicated to it. Pieces of metal, presumably from prior landers, were used as decoration. Another similar figure appears, measuring slightly shorter at 306 centimeters. The 2 figures kneel in front of the shrine. Communication ceases for 49 minutes. When it resumes, lander has been moved back, giving it a clear view. Yet another figure is standing at the altar with a lowered head. Figure turns to face the camera. This one was odd. Markings were present along the creature's scales. For what purpose, we'll get into later. The next few frames are simply more shots of this specific individual. Strangely, there's no malice in this one. Merely a solemn gaze into the lens. It's the first Martian that didn't give me a death glare. 4 other figures enter the frame. The middle figure, hereby designated as the tribute, gets on top of the altar and lays down on its back. The 4 others each take 1 limb from the tribute and hold it in place before restraining the tribute to the shrine. Tribute shows no signs of hesitation. This frame appears to show them communicating with the others. The 4 figures exit the scene, leaving Tribute alone. 9 minutes pass before a figure enters the frame and stares at the camera. I won't lie, I almost stopped there. Those eyes, I know them. Spirit knows them. Oppie knows them. It was as if this fucking thing was following me. But this was the past, long before Spirit made contact. My heart started racing faster after seeing it, but I pressed on. The voiceover ends, leaving just the photos streaming like video. Tribute seemed agitated, almost distressed even, as the larger creature stepped back, gaze fixated on the camera. With its two hands, it places them onto Tribute's body, tracing the markings with its claws. With a sickening grin, its claws pierce down into Tribute's scales, tearing apart their flesh. There's no audio attached, but Tribute's expression changed from one of fear and desperation to one of agony. I won't go into detail here for the sake of your sanity, but Tribute was swiftly eviscerated with ruthless efficiency, splattering the shrine with yellow blood. They remained alive for a long while, but eventually succumbed to their wounds. The cuts were drawn along the symbols of their body. When the deed was done, the monster rose from the shrine, eyes having never left the cameras. Then, with one quick strike, it tore Lander apart, ending the signal. The rest of the report talks about the implications and the definite cover-up that would need to happen. My first time watching, I was speechless. If these things were willing to slaughter their own so savagely, that doesn't bode well for future interactions. After that, I didn't know where to look. The Soviets knew something. They did something, but Lander's fate gave no insight into what exactly they did. I had to look elsewhere, and my search eventually led to something entirely new. A completely off-the-records mission. One that was never revealed to the public, let alone what she had found. It was a rover crafted to follow up on Lander's findings. And this lone adventurer went unnamed. I've decided to name her Journey. It just felt wrong for any rover to go as just a statistic. Journey was secretly launched on January 29th, 2000. Her destination was the same as Lander's. Her cameras were much more equipped. They were capable of sending an actual live feed, rather than static images. She made touchdown in mid-February, quickly moving to where Lander had fallen. There's no report on this one, only video files and pictures. For the first 3 days, she just travels, finally finding the shrine late the third night. The blood was dried out by now, scarcely any evidence of the slaughter before. Journey continued to explore the shrine, finding smaller altars and very familiar obsidian rocks. For a large chunk of the footage, no life is seen. Eventually, Journey makes her way down a small and cramped corridor before reaching an expansive open room. Hanging from the rocky ceilings sat dozens of bioluminescent flora, each glowing shades of blue, some dimmer than others. The soil beneath was coated with a dim red grass. Journey paused for a moment, as if she was taking in the view. Small vines stuck out from the grass with bulbous fruit attached. Carefully, she crept towards one, reaching out and taking a fruit to examine. It had an almost ocean blue color and was shaped like a cross between a pear and a banana. Journey didn't have the dexterity to peel back the skin, not without damaging the fruit, I assume. So she gently placed it onto the ground. Following another passageway, she entered a slightly smaller room that shared many traits with the prior. Instead of the pear-like fruit, this room seemed reserved for the cultivation of a large watermelon-like fruit, differed only by its mango mixture of colors. This room was a dead end, so Journey turned around, back the way she came. The next few rooms are all of the same caliber, a room containing a single type of fruit. It wasn't until Journey encountered a massive underground ravine that things changed. The small opening gave way to an expansive chasm, walls adorned with balconies and doorways all the way to the top. It was undeniable, an underground Martian village. Journey stood for a moment, gawking at the sight as I assume her handlers were too, simply moving the camera to view all she could. Journey's field of view caught several lingering creatures, the brightest and clearest view I've ever had of them. One particular Martian was at work with the pieces of lander, trying to mend it with another unidentified spacecraft. My eyes lit up as Journey slowly approached, giving a clearer view of the heavily faded flag of the USSR. The Soviets had definitely been here before, but as expected, their craft fell victim to the hostile life. Despite the danger presented, Journey pushed forward until you could see the glimmer of the Martian's eyes. Like tribute, this one, I'll call him Mechanic, was contrary to the typical malicious glare of his kin. Rather, it was one of childlike curiosity, poking and pulling at the metal. When Mechanic finally noticed Journey, they simply sat as the rover approached, arm extended. Mechanic pressed both of their tails against the rover in what I assume is a greeting, before turning their attention back. Fascinatingly enough, most of the Martians that interacted with Journey did so positively. It's surreal seeing them act so jovial to something they gleefully destroyed. Venturing further into the village, the rover found a small icy blue pond. A quick analysis confirmed it was water. Incredibly pure water at that. Lush red grass encircled the pond. Mechanic approached from behind, quickly getting onto their stomach to stare at Journey. Their eyes locked, as much as one can while staring at a camera. The wonder in their eyes reminds me of myself, years prior. The excitement, the drive to want to know more. It almost made me forget what I had seen them do. It probably would have, if not for what happened next. Mechanic's attention was drawn away suddenly, by a loud sound perhaps, and Journey followed suit 6 minutes later. By then, most of the Martians had left, only a few stragglers sticking around and even fewer going down the white path. Journey gave chase, slowly but surely. The path led her to a large room reminiscent of the shrine, except perhaps more refined and focused. Hundreds of the Martians were gathered around, staring. Walked towards the altar, each lending their strength to carry a body of their own. Reaching the end of the hall, they were sprawled out, and my horror rose tenfold. They weren't bodies. They were people. living, breathing people, men on Mars, and they were terrified. The two males were chained to the altar while the blonde woman was dragged to Journey where she was hidden off camera. I screamed at the rover to move, to help, to do something other than stand and watch. But her operators gave her no aid to assist. Journey was as powerless as these men. The crowd seemed to go insane, beyond ecstatic at the prospect of a ritualistic slaughter. The man on the right, with brown hair, stared defiantly at Leader, bravely facing his death with dignity. The quality of the camera was good enough to even let me see him spit at his killer mockingly. Judging purely by appearance, he was Russian. The Soviets had been to Mars. They even landed on it. I can see why they didn't say. The Russians' taunting was short-lived. Leader jabbed its claws into his abdomen with what must have produced a sickening crack. I grimaced at the sight, but pressed on. The man never screamed, as far as I could tell. He seemed to be laughing in the face of death. I so wish there was audio to know what he had been saying. Even as Leader furiously tore into his chest, the man stayed steadfast until he could laugh no more. A corpse on the slab. The man beside him seemed much younger and significantly less composed. Terror was visible on his face as Leader prepared to deliver him onto the same fate. His eyes made contact with Journey, her lenses echoing the apathetic stance of her operators. The second man had no time to beg. Leader cracked open his chest like a newborn xenomorph would hatch from its host. The man thrashed, kicked, screamed, cried. It made no difference. Leader didn't care, and neither did the operators. Journey sat there, forced to watch along with the woman. The man's torment didn't last long. Mercifully, he died quick. Leader stepped back, hunching over with its head pointed up. It unhinged its jaws in what I can only imagine was an unholy roar of sadistic pride. The crowd was pleased, to say the least. Leader went on to drag out the woman, who had tears in her eyes, forcing her to stare at the camera. She shook her head, reluctant of something. But her resistance was put to an end with Leader's razor-bladed tail slicing across her back. She fell over, blood pouring out her back before picking herself up, emotion draining from her face. She says something, her body trembling, before the feed finally cuts out. Journey's end. The first time I saw that, I was distressed. I was scared. I was enraged. I didn't even try to think about what she had said. The next day, I watched it again, preparing to transcribe it. It was only then my interest took note. Leader wanted her to say something. It was most definitely in Russian, a language I'm not fluent in, let alone reading lips to understand. I've given it my best shot, and, well, there's no question about it. I have to find out what the Soviets found. I have to find out what they did. I'm too deep into this now, and hell, I probably know enough to where I might actually be in real danger now, especially with all I'm revealing. But the world needs to know. You have to know what she said. This is all our fault. My grandfather passed away in 2007. He was 70 years old exactly. He was old enough to have seen the moon landing live, all the way back in 1969. Most everyone who saw the footage was enamored by the prospect that we as a species has made it to Luna, to a place our ancestors thought was too far from our reach. Even now, it fills people with a sense of wonder and awe for the solution of the impossible. My grandfather was the only man I knew who felt otherwise. A gut feeling told him that something terrible is out there in the stars, and that by landing on the moon, we open the door to madness. After everything that's happened so far, I'm inclined to believe him. The insanity, of course, wasn't on the moon, but rather our dearest neighbor Mars, the Roman god of war. At times, I think how fitting that name has become over time. I've dug in as far as I can for answers. Just the opportunity to know a little bit more is all I seeked, and I found what I was looking for. Dear Lord, do I regret it, however. Before I get into that, let me catch you up on some things as well as answer a few questions and comments I've received. A month ago, one of our rovers, Curiosity, encountered alien life on Mars. She is the third to do so that I knew of after Spirit and Opportunity, all of which I was here to witness for myself. Just recently, I've discovered that the Soviets have not only landed spacecraft on Mars, but succeeded in doing what NASA has not, putting man on Mars. Now, let me address some comments. I've seen a few people suggesting we glass or nuke the planet, and I don't need to explain why that won't work. We can barely send rovers to Mars, let alone nuclear weapons. Furthermore, these creatures have adapted to survive on the surface, so I doubt the resulting radiation would have much effect if the sun does nothing. We'd need a much more powerful weapon than what we have access to now. Some people have also mentioned that perhaps we are the intruders, and I don't know what to say to that. Hell, we might be to some, but they appear to have a vendetta against us specifically. Next, someone mentioned they might be building a rocket. I'm inclined to agree after what I've seen now. I can only hope they fail. I'll explain that later. Now, with that out of the way, let me tell you what I found. Much to my dismay, the Soviets did a damn good job at covering up their landings. So much so that almost all of the records are lost or destroyed. Almost all of them. A scarce few remain, and with a bit of digging and bribery, I've gotten a look at them. Most of it is heavily redacted, apart from the centerpiece, what I was definitely happy to find. The live feed recording of the Soviets' Martian landing from 1989, audio and all. I can't upload the video, as it will almost definitely attract attention. That's why I haven't uploaded anything beyond my posts. But I certainly can transcribe this for you. The feed starts from the cone of the landing craft as it descends onto the Martian landscape. For a few minutes, nothing of note happens, until the door unseals and slowly opens. Out steps a man who cuts the feed, swapping it to show video and audio from his helmet, exclaiming in Russian. I don't know what exactly he said. He faces the other impressively large pot, from which the female, Stella Zolina, if records are correct, from Journey's footage exits. She is visibly much younger, 10 years younger in fact. My stomach churns, thinking about how long she had been held captive there. The two begin a short exchange.
Touchdown?
She asks.
Yes, we did it. Can you hear us, Commander? We're on the surface.
The man replies with beaming enthusiasm. The woman steps aside to give room for the rest of the crew to come out. It's a rather large crew of 7 people. 2 men who I recognized from Journey's footage are among them. Thanks to documents, I know that their names are Maxim Durov and Yakov Selner. The 6th crew member gathered in a line as the camera operator showed them off one by one, admiring the dedication and heroism of his crew.
Yakov, you seeing this? I can't believe it.
One cosmonaut, Sergei Chernov, says. Yakov, the crying man from the previous video, steps out of formation and looks around in awe. He is joined by two others.
We're heroes, the pride and joy of millions. How could I believe it?
Yakov answers. The second woman, Documents namer Natia Letova, re-enters the capsule along with Maxim and a man named by Documents as Luchak Turbin. That leaves Damian Poltonov as the cameraman. The footage is mostly uneventful for the first 30 minutes or so. Mostly the crew discussing their excitement and pride for the successful landing while they set up equipment and gather samples. Yakov takes a Soviet flag from the craft and ventures with Sergei to find a place to plant it.
Careful and be back in 10, no less.
Damian orders. Yakov chuckles and keeps walking. I can almost feel Damian roll his eyes. He steps in the pot, and the next 10 minutes are simply just waiting. Of course, neither Yakov nor Sergei returned.
Yakov, what's the holdup?
Luchak asks impatiently. No response.
Yakov? Sergei?
Nothing but silence.
Come in, Yakov. This is Sergei. Can you read me?
Sergei's voice is dumbstruck, contrasting how tough it sounds otherwise.
We found a structure.
Luchak turns to look at Damian in confusion. Natia has no answers either, if she even noticed.
Explain, Sergei. It's a cavern. Deep. Can't see far into it. Yakov wouldn't listen and went down. Lost comms. Tried to follow, but it's too dark.
There is a hint of panic in Sergei's voice. I could tell what cavern he found. I knew exactly what he was referring to. The shrine.
Fucking idiot, Yakov. How did he even pass? Sergei, stay where you are. Maxim, Stella, bring him a lamp. Go find that idiot. Damian, Natia, stay with me.
I could agree with Luchak's anger. Even though he couldn't have shown, Yakov was clearly not the brightest. Maxim and Stella pack up a few supplies before heading out. Damian gives the camera to Stella and the two head out. The trek to Sergei felt ever familiar. The unmarked ground being filled with footsteps that would be joined by a rover's slow riding across the ground. When Sergei came into view, he waved to Maxim as the cavern was visible behind him. It confirmed my fears. It was definitely the same cavern Lander and Journey had encountered.
Hey, we got the lamp. Have you heard from Yakov?
Maxim asked, setting down the lamp and looking into the hole in the surface.
Nothing, man. Not even static. That idiot's probably lost by now. I told him not to go in. At least I kept the flag.
Sergei gestured to the Soviet flag, whose pole was firmly planted into the ground. A sense of national pride filled his eyes.
I'll stay here. Don't get lost now, and keep in touch with me or Luchak.
Maxim moved to the flag, standing tall next to it as it flapped in the wind.
Stella's with me then? Nice.
Sergei chuckled and glanced at Stella, who scoffed.
In your dream, Sergei.
Stella shut him down.
Luchak, we're at the crevice. Trench is about 3 meters in diameter. Maxim will stay up here, while Sergei and I look for Yakov. That good, Commander? Permission granted. Go ahead, you two. Don't get lost.
Luchak replied. With that, Sergei and Stella made their way into the cavern. Maxim held the light, leading the way while Stella followed behind him. Occasionally, she'd look down and pick up a rock or some dirt. It wasn't until she encountered a six-sided obsidian prism that she spoke again.
Come look at this.
Sergei turned around and walked over to her, glancing down at the rock as she held it in her palm.
What the hell is that? Don't know, Maxim. Luchak, can you hear us?
Stella called in, but there was no reply. Judging by the terrain, they were almost at the shrine.
Damn, no signal. Too far down. Heard from Yakov yet? No, I haven't heard anything from him. Let's...
Sergey was interrupted by an ear-piercing shriek. When I first watched it, I fell back from my chair in shock. It was an incredibly loud, inhumane scream that was tinged with pain and fear. Sergey and Stella rushed down the halls to the source when Yakov's voice finally came in. He was screaming incoherently, violently swearing and gasping for breath before the two reached him at the shrine. Dead on the floor with yellow blood was a smaller Martian, whose head was bashed in with a rock held by Yakov.
What the fuck?
Sergey didn't even have time to ask questions before three more poked their heads into the chamber, rage visible in their eyes from the side of one of their dead. The next few minutes were a blur. Stella made a break back the way she came, while Sergey stayed to try and defend Yakov. But as the tapes from the future showed, their fight wouldn't matter. Frantic panting started to fill the audio, drowning out the sounds of screams and fighting from the shrine. Miraculously, Stella got close enough to regain communication with Maxim, who picked up on her horrified gasping.
What the hell is going on down there? We lost you 6 minutes ago. What? Get back to the fucking shuttle, Maxim!
Stella demanded.
Calm down, Stella. I can't. There's something down here. Now fucking move, Maxim. Something? You mean, yes, Maxim. Now hurry. They're right behind me.
Stella looked back to see two Martians running across the cavern's floor on all fours, chasing her with a maddening bloodlust. A light at the end of the tunnel gave way to the surface where Stella nearly collapsed into Maxim's arms. Their reunion was short-lived thanks to the creatures behind, which grabbed onto Stella and began dragging her back into the cave. She screamed in horror, kicking and fighting all she could, but the monsters had the upper hand. They tore into her spacesuit, trying to reach the skin beneath. I'll give credit to the Soviets. These suits weren't cheap, and it showed. The creatures that I had seen tear metal into shreds couldn't make a dent in the suit. Maxim must have realized things were lost when even more emerged from the cave, as they started running back towards the shuttle while the Martians gave up on trying to get to Stella's body, simply opting to drag her back into the darkness as she screamed and begged for help. The feed cuts out then and there. I thought that was it. But when I went to stop the footage, I noticed how long it was. It was days long, and giving a cursory glance showed that most of it was black empty feed. That is, until the end of the 5th day, when the footage finally returns. Stella is sitting in some sort of prison chamber, holding the camera in her hands, pointing it towards her face. She is still wearing the tattered and dirty remains of her spacesuit as she wept softly. After a few seconds, she spoke.
This is Stella Zolina, age 27, part of the USSR's Martian Expanse program. I don't know if Command is receiving this. Likely not. The transmitter should still be online back at the shuttle. If the shuttle is intact, that is. I don't know if it is or not. I'm reporting one confirmed fatality. Natia Letova. May she rest in peace as an honor to her country. Those things. They killed her, took her to some sort of table, strapped her down, and tore out her guts. Made us watch as their fucked up crowd cheered them on. Yakov is badly injured. They're letting us patch him up. I don't know why. I don't know why they're keeping us alive. There's air down here. It's impossible, and it shouldn't be the case, but there's breathable air down here. I saw a couple of plants and farms on my way in. I can hear them speak sometimes, at what I assume must be night. I can't tell down here, and it's hard. Their voices are a bit scratchy and range from mellow to violent. I think there's some now. Hold on.
Stella pauses, holding the camera close to the wall. I can vaguely make out the sounds of alien chatter. Their voices seemed wrong, somehow. I don't know how to put it, but it made me feel very uneasy. It's difficult to describe. The best way to put it is, it sounds like a mixture between some sort of reptilian croaking and an Asian dialect.
Sorry, I'm distracted now. I just want to go home, you know? Never thought I'd get accepted for this program. And when I first got on the ship, I thought this would be something amazing. And we did land here. We did. We've made it to Mars. I don't think the inhabitants are happy about it. I don't know if it's because Yakov killed one. He says it attacked him first. Another thing I've noticed is that every day they take one of their own down into that first room we found. And after a few minutes, they come back without them, coated in blood. Sergey says it's some sort of sacrificial ritual. They drag the last one kicking and screaming. I don't know why they're killing their own and not us, but...
Stella is interrupted by off-camera shuffling, which prompts her to turn the camera towards the noise, showing Damien still in his spacesuit but awake. Beside him is Luchak, who is tending to Yakov.
You finally got that thing working? They need to send men up here and fucking trash the place. Shoot every single one of those fucking lizards. Those bastards deserve it after what they did to...
Damien himself is interrupted when Luchak interjects.
Don't be a fucking idiot, Damien. You think anyone's gonna help?
Luchak scoffs, shaking his head. It reminds me of the date of this recording, 1989, 31 years ago. He was right. Nobody would save them. Hell, we knew about them since 1999, and we didn't even bother to help. We just covered it up and moved on. Damien grumbles and walks towards Stella, taking a seat right next to her. He offers to hold the camera wordlessly, and she obliges, handing it over to him.
They took Sergey and Maxim for something. I don't know what. They still haven't found the ship, as far as we know. When Sergey explained, we decided to abandon the ship, leading those things off course. God knows that if they found it, they're looking for it. I think they know that it can get them to Earth. Fuck, if they find it.
Damien's grim expression as he stared hopelessly into the camera spoke miles. The sudden recognition in his eyes gave way to sorrow. I remembered that we never saw that craft. Movement comes from outside the cell, and Damien aims the camera to watch with him. A group of Martians march towards it, pushing Sergey and Maxim along. Damien stops breathing for a moment, the view of the camera shaking intensely.
Luchak, how long do the ship's transmitters function after touchdown?
Damien asks, his voice dead set on a suicidal idea that I already knew he'd go through with.
About a week or two tops. Why?
Luchak answers, oblivious to Damien's idea. Stella gasps, seemingly putting two and two together.
I'm going to get this camera to the ship and send the feed to command. Then I'm going to activate the launch sequence.
Damien explains his plan. Stella quietly pleads with him not to as the Martians grow closer.
The launch sequence won't function without the coolant tanks. It'll blow itself apart. I know. Do you need us to buy you some time?
Luchak is heard getting up as well, and Stella sighs, realizing that there's no use arguing against Damien.
Do whatever you can do. Sergey and Maxim are smart enough to know. I can get back there easily. I'll get this sent out, so Command knows what kind of fucked up shit is down here.
Stella and Luchak were in silent agreement. When the Martians opened the cell door, the three of them charged into them, catching all of them off guard.
Damien made a break for it with the camera, as the others did what they could to hold him back. After a short scuffle, Luchak's pained screams echoed through the damp, dark corridors before it turned to eerie gurgling, as I could only assume his body was defiled and ripped into endless shreds. Thankfully, Damien didn't turn the camera back to look. He kept going through the caves, reaching the massive area Journey would encounter a decade later, then running into the farming rooms. I knew he'd make it, but the tense sounds of the creatures crawling across the halls right behind him, I don't know how he had the courage to keep running. Past a familiar shrine, adorned with a Martian's mangled corpse, indicating the recent sacrifice, and into the natural formations of the cave, until the distant beams of the sun were shining through the crack in the surface. The flag of the USSR was still firmly attached to its flagpole. Damien ripped it from the ground and finally glanced behind him with the camera. He swung the pole with all of his strength as one of the Martians came to the surface, knocking them back into the others in a pile. Taking the advantage while they were down, he speared the pole through all 5 of them, slicing into their scaled flesh and sending their blood flying with an audible yell. Victorious, Damien continued his sprints towards the craft, having bought himself time. In the distance, it came into view, Damien clutching the camera tightly in his hand. I could hear more scampering behind him. They were back on track. He quickly undid the seal, pulling the hatch and climbing inside. Before he could close it, one of the Martians dived into the opening, becoming trapped with him inside. The noises outside stopped. It was clear they didn't want to risk destroying the spacecraft. Damien swung at the monster inside of the craft, knocking him to the ground. He took a moment to show the view outside from the interior of the shuttle, before speaking one last time.
If this thing is still on, stay the fuck away from here. You got that?
The feat finally ends as Damien presumably hooked up the camera to send back all of the footage it had obtained. The rest of the Soviets' records showed that the craft stopped sending any signals 8 minutes later, indicating its destruction in the failed takeoff. The Soviets were dumbfounded and horrified. All of their remaining reports indicate the absolute chaos they devolved into after. Hell, it may have even contributed to the collapse of the Union for all I know. Thoughts of many people believing it may be best to destroy nations to hide the truth. Whatever the case is, Russia isn't even aware of this. Everyone assigned around that time either went into isolation, assumed new identities, or took their lives.
So, that's how it is. You'd expect something huge to come from our discovery. The second revolution of astronomical science was set to take hold when we met life from the stars. We met it so close to home, and this is how it ends. Not with greeting or apology, but massacre. I still debate with myself if there was something else we could have done. Sometimes I wonder, had Yakov not killed that Martian, would we be in this situation? Or were these hostilities inevitable? Could this have ended with two races uniting against the sky? I'll never know. Nobody will ever know. It's too late to turn back. Not just for me, but for us. Whether or not we did the right thing is another question entirely. I'm afraid this will be my last post on this topic, so let me get everything out of the way before I start. Over the past month, I found myself involved in the discovery of life on Mars and the horrid implications of their hostility. I still don't understand the most of it. I think that's for future generations to figure out. We never deciphered any of their writing, nor did we bother to study their language. The Martians' culture is something that another person will get to understand. Their cycle of daily slaughter, the strange kindness displayed by the few, we'll never realize what any of it means. And it's our fault. I don't know if we did the right thing. That's for you to decide. First, a short recap. I'm a scientist working at NASA, and I've gotten to witness our several meetings with the enigmatic reptilians known as Martians. These creatures were responsible for the destruction of Spirit and Opportunity, two rovers we launched in 2004. I later found out that we had seen them before, once with a lander, and the second time with a secret rover I named Journey. Journey's footage showed proof that the Soviets had not only landed on Mars, but apparently had landed people on the planet. My dive into that gave me a full video of most events that transpired. More worryingly, it proved the theory I had been trying to ignore. The Martians were trying to get to Earth. After I posted that, I discovered that one of our rovers, Curiosity, had been captured by the creatures, and that she may just hold the key to humanity's safety. Now, on to what transpired since. The rover Curiosity was equipped with a hidden compartment, one that not even her engineers knew of. Inside were several toxins and explosives, all extremely powerful and tiny in scale. You see, in the event she was taken, we had a plan. By our luck, the Martians scooped her up and took her to their hive, exactly as we had planned for. Curiosity was left inside of the shrine room while the creatures awaited their ceremony, and that's when we had to decide. Curiosity was capable of wiping them out. The toxins would rapidly destroy cellular structures and dissolve easily into water. The explosives would be laid out at strategic locations, making the hive susceptible to a remote detonation intended to ensure their fates. 25 people got to decide the fate of an intelligent species. I wasn't among them, and I don't envy any of the men and women who had to make that choice. The vote was close, 14-4 to 11 against. In the end, however, they had our answer. We were to proceed with the plan. Curiosity slowly made her way down the farming sector of the hive, occasionally piercing a fruit with a lethal poison at our discretion. The Martians that did notice her paid no mind, even when she entered the central hub. From there, she took every source of water she could find, dousing them with the toxin. One by one, each pool of water was laced with the lethal poison. When ingested, it was intended to target many systems of the body, more than necessary in case their biology is extremely different and rapidly shutting them down as painlessly as it could. In some other spots, she laid down one of the microscopic explosives. One of the creatures took notice of the poisoning, almost threatening to destroy the rover. Fortunately, they walked to the pond and scooped up the water with their hands, 4 scaly fingers ending in sharp daggers. Cusping the liquid, they slid it into their throat and swallowed. The result was unexpected. After mere seconds, the Martian's eyes expressed myriads of pain as the poison began its work. They fell over, clutching their head, shivering and spasming before their jaw unhinged in a horrifically silent scream of unbridled suffering. They kicked the pond and smashed it into the floor, the jagged movements reminiscent of a stroke victim. Curiosity simply continued on, emotionless to the torture having befallen the creature. Most of the crew was emotionless too. Turning the camera back for one last glance, the Martian, having gathered the attention of others with their screaming, was bashing their skull against the rock walls, staining it with blood in a desperate bid to stop the pain. Finally, they fell to their knees and collapsed, dead on the cavern floor. We had worried the toxins wouldn't work. Turns out, they worked too well. Regardless, she had a mission to do. We had a mission to do. Carrying on through tunnel after tunnel, she encountered resistance when what I assume is one of their priests arrived, fury in his stare. He lunged at the rover, ready to strike her down. We couldn't react in time due to the delay, but we didn't have to. Luck remained on our side. The priest pricked himself on the grasp of curiosity, allowing the poison to enter his body. We didn't stay to watch this time. Apparently, that was enough to send the majority of Martians into submissive fear of curiosity. None dared get close to her, clearing her path through the tunnels. Going deeper, she found a group of the creatures huddled around a large blossoming flower. It resembled a rose, except it was tinted a strange hue of pink, tinted slightly gray. A small Martian, presumably a child, was sat atop. The crowd was too entranced to notice as curiosity entered the next room. This room was simply breathtaking. It opened to a massive expanse reaching hundreds of meters in all directions. Most of the room was an underground lake, water reflecting the glittering crystals that lined the ceiling, and the crystals themselves shining the reflection of Curiosity's gaze back down into the water. There was no telling how deep the lake went. We couldn't risk getting her close enough to see. The best guess we have is a couple 100 meters of clear and pristinely clean water stretching down into the crust of Mars. It was definitely their primary water source, and a decision was made to dump most of the remaining toxins into this lake, keeping a few on hand just in case. With that, Curiosity turned back through the flower room and into the central hub, where she was noticed by Leader. I knew it was him. I just knew it, even from his faraway eyes. I could tell who it was. I think the rest of us did too. Leader stormed towards the rover in fury, lifting her up and carrying her with his strength. Beside him, many more Martians began to follow him obediently. It was time for their ritual. The grand scale of the water room was outdone by the temple, which had been substantially increased in size and grandeur since the late 90s. Hundreds to thousands of chairs were positioned across the delicate pavement, each carved to fit the stature of the Martians. Engraved into each obsidian seat were symbols much like the ones on the prism seen before. As Leader made his way to the centerpiece, the Martians filtered in through the numerous entryways, all taking their place on the finely crafted thrones. Decorating the center shrine were distinct human bones, all of them seared into unrecognizable patterns of glory, celebrating their deaths. Curiosity was stationed on top of a large slab to prevent her escape as Leader awaited the sacrifices. From the main entrance, emerged a group of Martians wearing cloaks of tough fabric, likely salvaged from the suits brought by the Soviets. The group forced along 5 blindfolded individuals, only 2 of whom were continuing to put up any resistance. The other 3 marched in seemingly reluctance, although knowledgeable of the inevitability of their fates. They reached the expanded altar, and one by one the tributes were forced onto the stone and had their arms and legs spread out to the sides and held down with a makeshift chain. Curiosity zoomed in on the preparation, revealing the intricacies of the ritual being performed. The priests made swift yet smooth motions, clearly accustomed to the movement involved with this process. We contemplated detonating the explosives while they worked, but decided to wait instead, keeping the small devices ready to activate at a moment's notice. This would be the last thing we'd ever see from the Martians, so I suppose we didn't want to waste it. With the tributes prepared, Leader picked up one of the larger bones resting against the altar. He showed it to the crowd, to their silent yet defeating glee, then held it in front of Curiosity's camera. He grasped it tightly, glaring into the lens with burning, unending hatred, before swiftly turning around and slamming the bone into the skull of the leftmost sacrifice, cracking apart the scales to reveal the squishy interior caked with blood. The leader continued to slam the blunt end into the now dead Martian's head, flattening it and splattering himself in blood with each blow. This went on for minutes, the crowd in the distance visibly cheering him on. As before, I could make out a solitary few individuals who seemed as disgusted with the brutality as I was. Finally, Leader finished the sacrifice, resting the bone on top of the deceased's neck. He reached down to retrieve a second bone and moved to the rightmost victim, one of the strugglers. Leader once again displayed the weapon to the camera, ensuring Curiosity had a long, intense gaze with the club. With one slash, he tore into the next target's chest, ripping open a sizable hole in the center of their abdomen. The tribute screamed and thrashed against the chains to no use as Leader struck the bone into the gaping wound and stirred it like one would prepare a soup. This was the point most of us looked away. Not me. I kept my focus on what was unfolding, a reminder to myself that we did what we had to. If they were willing to employ such torture against their own, then humans who they hated so vehemently, they had to be stopped. Next to go was the victim in the middle. While we debated on activating the explosives and saving us the horror of witnessing the ritual, Leader started what I assume is some sort of recital or prayer. This continued for a while, the audience seen mimicking his movements and speech. We had seen enough, I heard being argued. I said nothing as the middle victim was promptly eviscerated by Leader's bladed claws. By the time he had finished, it was more than enough for the rest of us. I watched somberly as Curiosity was instructed to detonate the explosives. During the 6-minute delay, Leader gestured to the remaining sacrifices, and then to Curiosity, as if to taunt her. He made no moves, simply waiting for a response. From what I can tell, it seemed that he wanted us to decide who dies next. Something we never did. Time marched on, Leader growing ever more impatient, unaware of what was to come. And then, just like that, the feet cut to white as the explosives did their work, traversing throughout the caverns as they had been placed to do. Curiosity's signal was lost, as she presumably perished in the detonation. And really, that was it. Just like that, it was all over. It felt anticlimactic, because it was. I can't describe the emptiness that filled me after the fact. I thought we'd see something new from them before their end. Most of all, it was the loss of Curiosity that struck me. It wasn't like the other rovers who had died in their discoveries. Curiosity may have saved the world. She did what we had to, and she'd be lost because of it. Nobody would know the truth of her demise, relegated to a system failure that never happened. The world would remain blind to her sacrifice. That's what hit me hardest. After that, there wasn't much left to do. Files were expunged, records redacted or deleted outright. Video files from the past burned and left as ash. Payments made to keep people quiet. Many resignations along with them, myself included. I couldn't keep working, and the stars knowing all of this, then being expected to focus on the mundane. I just can't do that, as I'm sure you no doubt understand. I kept in contact with colleagues, but that was it for me. I patiently awaited the announcement of Curiosity's failure. It never happened though. Last night, I received a call from a close friend who was still working at NASA. It was about Curiosity. Just when they had prepared a cover story, she responded to a status request. By some impossible miracle, Curiosity had survived, almost entirely intact. She was in a dark unknown cavern, and with nothing else to do, she was sent onward down the cold lifeless path, coming into view of a light. It was an exit to the cave, leading to the surface, beams of the sun gleaming down onto her metal skin. I was relieved beyond belief to hear her survival. We don't know how it happened, nor how she ended up where she did. But nobody cared about that. Curiosity was alive and well, and could continue to explore safely without fear. In celebration, she took a few photos of the surrounding landscape. The desert red of Mars that I've come to fear and love at the same time. Dunes and hills scattered around, slight imperfections in the crust. After all that had happened, it was beautiful. One of the photos she took was of the cavern behind her. A wide shot that appeared as a still frame from a carefully directed film. Contrasting the bright lights of the surface was the dark abyss of the cavern. I couldn't take my eyes off of this image. It astounded me in a way, with the prospect of triumph it held, as Curiosity proudly stood alive against all odds. There's only one thing that soured this moment. The dozens of crimson dots staring from the darkness. I came home a year ago. Alex didn't. He was my best friend, the only one I could share everything with. Now I have no one but you, strangers on the internet. Sometimes it feels like I didn't return from that place either. At least, not as myself. A part of me, perhaps my desire to live, stayed behind. I guess you could say I'm depressed. It isn't until now I feel ready to tell anyone about what happened to us. We went through something so unfathomable that it's difficult for me to put into words. But I'll do my best. Back when it happened, almost 2 years ago, my best friend and I were both studying anthropology in France, and we were both avid cave explorers. During summer break, we had explored the most famous cave systems in France and studied all of the well-known cave paintings and remains from the Neolithic era. We both lived for this, so it was a no-brainer for us to spend our summer break doing the same kind of thing as we did at university. We had followed established guidelines, but the last week before we returned to our university town, we decided to explore Rigordo in search of caves that hadn't been yet discovered. This was a bit irresponsible since none of us were experienced enough for such an undertaking. But we were both thrill seekers, and even though we didn't believe we would find anything, the search itself was exciting enough for us to keep going. However, we did find something. It was Alex who saw it first. He yelled at me from where he was doing his business. "Hey Lester, come check this out." "What is it? You want me to see you pee?" I laughed at the thought of it. "No man, I think I found something." I got up from the rock I was sitting on and walked over to him. "So, what did you find?" Look at that boulder next to the cliff. Do you see it?" I did see it. There was a small entrance behind it. "No way," I said, but then I collected myself so I wouldn't get too excited. "Do you think it's possible? I mean, do you think it might lead to a larger cave?" "I don't know," Alex said. "There's only one way to find out, right?" "I guess," I said, feeling my heart rate increase. It could be nothing. I find it hard to believe that no one would have discovered a cave system in this area. We aren't that far from the main road. "It's so small," Alex said. "It's easy to imagine it could have been missed. Anyway, shut up and help me move this boulder." We had to use all of our strength and some of our equipment to push it aside. We crouched down and looked inside the entrance. I expected it to be nothing more than a small recess, but it was deep. "Hello?" Alex yelled into the hole in the cliff, and the echo slowly faded away somewhere far inside the bedrock. We debated what to do next, but the excitement in our voices made it clear we had already decided. The responsible thing to do would have been to report our findings and let professionals map out the cave. But we weren't going to just hand over a finding like this to someone else. Instead, we put on our gear. We crawled our way inside of the cave. Had we been just a tad bit bigger, we would never have fit. That was how small the opening was. I didn't suffer from claustrophobia. If I did, I wouldn't have been a cave explorer. But I didn't enjoy small passages like this. The thought of getting stuck still made me cringe. I had read enough horror stories about cave explorers getting killed that way to do my best to avoid crawl spaces, but in this case, I made an exception. Alex went in first, and I followed close behind him. A few meters in, a cold wind reached us. "Are you feeling this?" Alex said as he pushed his body through the small cave. "That's a cross breeze." "Good," I said with some relief in my voice. "That means there's an opening somewhere further ahead." The cold air coming from inside the cave smelled fresh. It was exactly what we needed after having spent the entire day under the scalding heat outside. A short while later, however, we began to freeze. I asked Alex if he knew how it could be so cold. It seemed way too cold to be explained by the airflow, but he was as clueless as me. "Is it getting tighter or wider?" I asked. "I can't tell." "I'm not sure either," Alex said. We kept going. My body ached. In some places, it was so narrow that I thought I would have to break my ribs to get through. The cave went upward, forcing us to climb. Then it went down until it turned sharply and continued to the south. The total absence of light, except for our headlights, felt suffocating. We came across a pitch, a steep section that we had to use our ropes to get down. We had never tried cave diving before, and I felt really stupid doing it now, given how risky it was. A few more dangerous squeezes followed. The dust on the ground kept getting into my mouth. By now, I was exhausted. I think we should turn back," I said. "I'm getting too tired, and frankly, I'm starting to worry a little bit. We've been here for more than an hour. Perhaps we should try again tomorrow." "Don't give up, Lester," Alex said. "It will be extremely difficult to go back the way we came. There's nowhere to turn around. Our best shot is to keep going and try to find the other opening." I could hear fear in his otherwise confident voice. Something that scared me just as much as our predicament. Just moments later, Alex spoke again. "There's an opening ahead.
It leads to a larger room, just a few more meters. I had to push Alex to press him through the opening, and as soon as he was out, he pulled me out. The room was big enough for us to stand in. It was only illuminated by our flashlights and headlights. Looking back at the hole we just came out of, it was clear that it was too small for us to enter. Squeezing yourself out of a tiny hole is one thing, crawling inside of it another. Realizing this, my heart almost stopped. If the hole that let the cold air in was too small as well, if there was such a hole at all, we would die in here. I pointed my flashlight at Alex's face. His frosty, agitated breath told me he was just as terrified as I was. Slowly, we tracked the walls with our flashlights. To our relief, there was a second opening big enough for us to enter. Before I had time to cool down, something inside of the opening caught my eye. It was a skeleton, covered in some dark clothes. The lower part of his body was still inside the hole, meaning he or she must have died trying to crawl out of it and gotten stuck. "Shit, Lester," Alex said. "It's good news," I said with a shaky voice. "It means we're going to get out." We sat down next to the remains, first to examine it and then move it so that we could enter the small opening. The skull was lying face down, but based on the color of the bones, we immediately saw that his skeleton wasn't prehistoric. There was no soft tissue left, but as far as skeletons go, it looked rather fresh. Alex reached for the skull and carefully picked it up and held it in front of us. "Give me some light," he said. I shone my flashlight on the face of the skull. It almost looked like it was smiling at us. A big, horrific grin. "Put it away," I said. "Wait," Alex said. "Look at it. There's something." "What?" I asked in a whisper. "Can't you see it?" he asked rhetorically. I was too stressed to see anything particular with it. "It's surprisingly elongated." He turned the skull around. "The back of his head is massive, and look at the top. Not very globular, you see?" I began to see what he was talking about, but my mind didn't grasp what he was trying to tell me. "So?" I said. He turned the skull around so that the face was staring at us again. "Look at its facial structures. Very pronounced. What are you trying to say? Its eyebrows are heavy. Look, Lester. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think we are looking at the skull of a Neanderthal." "That is crazy," I said, although I could clearly see the similarities from the skulls we had been studying in class. "Look at the bones. It must have died at least within this century." "I know," Alex said, "and yet this is clearly the skull of a Neanderthal. I mean, I know Neanderthal DNA in humans can affect the shape of the skull, but this is something else. Do you think the environment in the cave could have helped preserve the bones this well?" "I don't know. That would be pretty crazy as well, but I can't think of any explanation right now that wouldn't be completely bonkers." With a mixture of fear, confusion, and excitement, we decided to carefully move the remains away from the opening and leave the cave so that we could report our findings to the university. This passage was larger, and we could make our way through it with ease. The worry disappeared from our voices as we crawled, and the excitement over what we had found took over. We did fear what the faculty would say about our amateurish expedition, but surely our discovery would compensate for our foolishness to some degree. We saw the light at the end of the cave, but strangely enough, it was still cold. Alex got out first. "Something is wrong," he said as I exited the cave. I saw what he meant. There were patches of snow in the grass. This was in late August, and it had been one of the warmest summers in recent memory. Dumbfounded, we looked around, trying to figure out what was going on. In front of us, there was a set of large boulders obscuring the view. We slowly walked past them and entered the forest. It seemed thicker than before. "How much time did we spend in that cave?" Alex said, trying to make it sound like a joke, although he was obviously frightened. It's winter, or I mean, it's early spring at least. I looked up at the sun, filtered behind a cover of clouds. The sun is where it's supposed to be, I said. Whatever is going on, this is the same day. I reached for my phone. The time and date were as expected, but there was no reception or internet connection. We tried to walk around the cliff we had come out of in an attempt to find our camp, but on the other side, there was nothing to be found. The disorientation I felt trying to comprehend what was happening almost gave me a panic attack. But there wasn't any time to panic. A gunshot echoed through the forest. 2 more followed. We decided to walk towards the sound in the hopes to find someone to talk to. However, we moved slowly so that we would see them before they saw us. We came to a small hill. Sounds of voices came from the other side of it, but we couldn't hear what they were saying. We climbed up on the hill, laid down on top of it, and peeked down. On the ground beneath us, there was a large dead animal covered in thick fur. "That's..." Alex began. "That's a mammoth," I continued. A group of people holding rifles stood around the dead animal. 4 of them were smoking, as far as I could see. They were covered in black cloths, similar to the one we had found in the cave, and they all had hoods on them, which made it difficult to see their faces. They didn't speak any language we had ever heard before. It reminded us of a Khoisan language, but instead of the clicking sounds normal for those languages, it sounded like knocking sounds coming from the bottom of their throats. Both Alex and I had the same impossible thought, that they belonged to the same species as the individual we had found in the cave. One of them blew a whistle. It didn't make any sound that we could hear. But a minute later, 4 large animals came out of the woods. "What are those?" I whispered. They were big as grizzly bears, but had wolf-like faces. Some of them began barking. I think they're dogs," Alex said. "Have you ever seen a dog like that before?" I said. "Look around you, Lester." Alex paused, as to think of the best way to explain it to my frantic mind. "Don't you get it? I know it's fucking insane, but just consider what all of this is pointing to. Those people aren't humans, man." "What are you on about?" I said, trying to deny his conclusion to the bitter end. "Are you really saying they had half a language? And going by the way they're moving their hands, parts of it are sign language." Alex was way ahead of me already. "Are you suggesting we have traveled back to the Neolithic age?" No, they have guns. As you said, this is the same day. It's just not the same Earth. I don't think Homo sapiens led them to extinction here. This is incredibly fascinating, Lester. I can't believe it. It feels like I'm dreaming. But you're seeing the same thing, right? I mean, I'm not lying in that cave, slowly dying from carbon monoxide poisoning, am I? "No, I'm seeing it too," I said. "Well, look at them. They domesticated the dog, but they bred them into something different than we did. And look, they didn't exterminate the megafauna. That points to a smaller population like we always suspected." I still didn't know what to think, but I began to entertain the idea. "It could explain the weather as well," I said, while I watched how one of the presumed Neanderthals patted one of the huge dogs. A smaller population of hominoids during 40,000 years would have meant a much smaller amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and... Something growled behind us, and then it barked. Our blood ran cold. I looked behind us. One of the large hounds had found us. "Lester?" Alex whispered as our eyes met. The beast charged at us. We had no choice but to run down the hill or right into the arms of the cloaked men. They gathered around us, pointing their rifles at us. They were huge, much larger than a typical man, or rather, human. Their knocking sounds, coming from deep inside their throats, was mixed in with the deep sounds that didn't resemble any language I had ever heard. From what I could tell by their hand movements and agitation in their voices, they seemed just as distressed as Alex and I. Their faces were shadowed by their hoods, but I could still see they had the typical Neanderthal facial structures. My thoughts, still having trouble accepting what was happening, was in a disarray. What will they do? I heard myself ask. As soon as I opened my mouth, one of the Neanderthals yelled something at us.
Halufska!
We both interpreted as something similar to hands up, and fell on our knees and raised our hands. It all depends what happened to Homo sapiens in this world, Alex whispered. If they see our species as mortal enemies, we might be doomed. But if we died out thousands of years ago, they'll probably want to keep us alive. The man that had yelled lit what looked like a mixture between a cigarette and a cigar with a large match. I tried to assess their level of technology. The rifles, clearly made for hunting, didn't have scopes, only iron sights. My first thought was that this indicated a lower technological level than the one we had at home. But then I realized that it might rather be a result of their larger eyes and areas of the brain devoted to vision. Maybe they simply didn't need scopes because of their superior sight. They talked for some time, and then one of them went away for a while and came back with some ropes that they used to tie our hands behind our backs. They didn't intend on killing us. Not right away anyway. If this said anything about the fate of Homo sapiens in this world, it was unclear though. They led us away, seemingly abandoning the animal that they had just killed. Maybe finding us was more valuable to them. They've invented the combustion engine, Alex exclaimed. He was right. A vehicle stood on a dirt road in front of us. It had 8 wheels, 6 at the back and 2 in the front, and resembled a diesel locomotive more than a truck. It was completely black, just like their clothes. They opened the back doors and pushed us inside the storage space. There was a smell of dead animals and gasoline. We were placed next to each other on a bench attached to the wall, and 2 of the Neanderthals sat down in front of us, looking at us constantly. The only light came from 2 small windows on the back door. The truck began to move. I wonder what they'll think about our cell phones, Alex said. The Neanderthals each lit one of the big cigarettes, and the glow from them lit up their strong faces. One of them had green eyes. They're smoking a lot, Alex whispered. Research shows that Neanderthal DNA may account for nicotine addiction. Yes, I said. And depression. You think they're depressed? Alex smiled, but the fear in his eyes didn't go away. We couldn't see anything outside, except that the sun was setting, but we felt the bumps in the road as the truck drove forward at a pretty high speed. After some time, the road became smooth. Had we reached a highway? It was hard to tell. We couldn't hear any other vehicles outside. Wherever we were going, it was far away. We didn't stop until 3 or 4 hours later. It must have been in the middle of the night, but we didn't get to see the night sky. When the back doors were opened, we stepped out inside of a large garage. There were a lot of black vehicles parked under the high ceilings, but none of them looked like the one we had come with. These vehicles were smaller, like cars, all black. I guess that this place wasn't where they usually went. The architecture was similar to Soviet-era brutalism and was as devoid of colors as everything else in this place. After what we had already seen, I wasn't surprised to discover that they had mastered electricity. However, they didn't use fluorescent lights, as in a modern garage, but rather pretty dim, but still large lamps hanging from the ceiling. Again, I came to think of their better vision. One of the hunters used a radio attached to the dashboard of their truck. After half an hour or so, a small door opened, the sound of it echoing through the garage. 3 people, a bit smaller, walked out of it. The group that had captured us pushed us in our backs so that we were straight in our backs. This seemed to be important to them, as they did it themselves as well. The new people didn't wear the same clothes as our captors. They still covered their faces, not with hoods, but with thin black veils. As they got closer to us, I could tell that they were women. They looked at us, obviously fascinated. One of them picked up what looked like a walkie-talkie and said something to it without taking her eyes off us. Carefully, her colleague reached out and knocked on my helmet that I was still wearing. We must have looked completely alien to them in our colorful gear and equipment. Although the women were smaller than the men, they were still much stronger than us. One of them led the men to another door, perhaps for questioning, and the other two, holding what looked like electric batons, took me and Alexander back to the room they had exited. We stepped into an elevator. Unlike the elevators we were used to, this one was merely a platform. My clothes scraped against the gray concrete walls of the shaft as we went up. Looking up, I could tell the building was tall. One of the women controlled the elevator with a lever rather than just pressing a button. It was all clunky and cumbersome, but remarkably effective. They took us to a small room similar to an interrogation room and had us sit down on two large chairs. A commotion took place outside of the room. People were running back and forth, talking to each other and into their radios. This scenario was nothing they had planned for. Different women entered the room from time to time. Some of them tried to talk to us. Some just wanted to take a look. We sat in this room for hours. After that, two male guards took us to yet another room. It looked like a locker room that had been cleared out for our sake. They seized our belongings. Alex took his helmet off and gave it to the woman who had knocked on it, and then he carefully turned on the headlight to show her how it worked. They didn't seem too surprised by it. Most likely, they had similar devices. The colorful plastic interested them much more, which I took as a sign that their technological level was maybe 100 or 50 years behind ours. Plastic, Alex said without being understood. They stripped off our clothes and pointed to a shower in the middle of the room. We placed ourselves there and one of the guards turned on the water. It was too cold, but overall they didn't seem to want to cause us any pain. After the shower, we were given a pair of yellow overalls to wear. In the next room, this one looked like a classroom, we were brought to the desk at the front. A group of women wearing protective masks had put our smartphones on the desk. Alex took his phone and unlocked it. This was the first time these people would see our level of technology. If they see this, he said to me, if they see how advanced we are compared to them, they'll let us live. He tried to be as pedagogical as he could, showing them the display as he pressed on the different apps. Of course, there wasn't any internet connection, so he couldn't show them anything online. Their eyes were transfixed on the colorful display. The males, who didn't seem to be allowed to do anything else but to stand guard, peeked down at the display in wonder. Alex smiled at the attention, almost as if he was proud. But I felt severely uneasy. He opened his gallery and showed them a video he had taken at a large climate change protest he had attended in New York. The Neanderthals' fascination turned into worry as they watched the skyscrapers and the hundreds of thousands of people marching down the streets. After this, one of the women looked at us suspiciously as she picked up a phone on the wall and called someone. After some deliberation, two women with batons led us into the elevator again. This time, we stopped at the last floor, maybe 200 meters above the surface. They took us through a corridor with what looked like office doors to the side. To my disappointment, there were no windows. A few other women stepped out of their offices and looked at us as we passed, equally mesmerized as they were scared. At the end of the hallway, there was a door that led into a room of greater importance than the other rooms. There was some text next to the door. I couldn't tell if the characters were phonetic or logographic, but at least they didn't look like hieroglyphs. One of the women pressed a button in the middle of the door. It didn't make any sound, but that was probably some sort of doorbell. While we waited for the door to open, a faint alarm could be heard from somewhere nearby. probably outside, and 1 minute later, the building began to shake a little. I looked at Alex, who looked back at me, but it didn't seem to face the Neanderthals. The door opened automatically. We were pushed inside the room. It was big, just like everything else. A black carpet, the skin of some animal, covered the floor, and a heavy desk stood in front of us. Behind it, another woman was sitting. Unlike the others, she didn't cover her face. Her hair was red, and her eyes were blue. She wore something similar to a jumpsuit. Not black, but light gray. She inhaled the smoke of a wooden pipe, rather than one of those cigarettes. And as she exhaled, I could smell that she was smoking a mix of tobacco and marijuana. Behind her, there was a large window, but nothing but darkness could be seen outside. There were no electric lights, which meant we weren't in a city. Perhaps, I thought, they didn't even have cities. The women who brought us here placed their batons at the fold of our knees, giving us an electric shock so that we fell in front of the massive desk. Alex yelled out in pain, but didn't look as scared as I was. My body trembled with fear. The woman sitting behind the desk got up from her chair and walked over to us. They spoke over our heads while we remained silent. They wouldn't understand us anyway. They won't harm us, Alex said. We're too valuable for them. I don't want to be locked up in a laboratory, I said. We will find a way, Alex began, but was interrupted by the woman that seemed to be in charge. She gestured toward us in a way that made it clear she wanted us to stand up. Alex got up, but for some reason, I couldn't move. One of the women grabbed my arm and more or less lifted me up on my feet in one swift moment. Their commander, or whatever she was to them, said something. The context didn't allow us to figure out what it was, other than maybe a question. She led us to one of the halls between two bookshelves filled with what looked like screw-bound books. There was a world map. At first glance, it didn't look like Earth. Alex took a hesitant step forward, and when the woman didn't seem to mind, I did too. I don't get it, I said, way too stressed to think clearly. The woman said something to us again, but this time it sounded more like a command. She probably wanted to know where we came from. Alex put his finger on the map. This is Africa, he said. It wasn't until he said that I saw it. The map had a completely different orientation. Firstly, it was a south-up map, meaning upside down from our perspective. Secondly, it was a little bit off-center, putting Central Europe right in the middle. And thirdly, the sizes of the landmasses were displayed a bit differently. Since we couldn't explain where we came from, Alex tried to give the woman the location of our species' origin instead. By the look of her face, she didn't seem to believe us. Still, she let us study the map while she studied us. Look, Alex said. There are no borders. They don't have countries, I said. But what about these pictograms? Small black skulls displayed from the side was spread all over the map. Dotted circles of different sizes surrounded them. Are they some kind of dead zones? You're anthropomorphizing. I don't think they symbolize death here, but rather themselves. Maybe they're cities or some kind of city-states. And look there. He pointed at what would have been Russia in our world. Those skulls are red. And wow, they're different, you see? What does it mean? Are you suggesting? I asked. Denisovans. It makes sense if you think about it. With a smaller population, the Neanderthals never drove the other hominid species to extinction. This is unreal. Alex's fascination overshadowed all of his fear. Look, there's a red line going alongside the Ural Mountains, and behind it, the Denisovans live. All the way to Australia, I said. But look here, Alex said without listening to me. He placed his finger at Indonesia. This blue region. The skulls there are different too. Can you see it? Homo floresiensis, I whispered. You bet. The black skulls, the Neanderthals, dominated Europe, Africa, and most of the New World, while the Denisovans seemed to rule Asia, together with a small area dominated by Homo floresiensis. The ice caps were, as expected, larger than in our world, but it didn't seem to prevent the Neanderthals from living close to the North Pole. They even had cities in Greenland, although their total amount of cities was smaller than the amount in most countries in our world. The woman, watching us carefully while we inspected the map, took a puff of her pipe and blew the smoke in our faces. Then, she returned to her desk and picked up what looked like a mouthpiece and made a call with the device it was connected to. She spoke aggressively to the person at the other end of the call. The alarm from outside that we had heard earlier, sounding like a mechanical Swedish cow horn, came back again. This time, it sounded louder, probably because we stood so close to a window. The woman didn't seem to care about it, but she raised her voice a little to compensate for the noise. Some electric lights turned on outside, but they didn't reveal much. About a minute or two later, huge flames erupted a couple 100 meters away, and a few seconds later, a rumble reached us. "A rocket!" Alex exclaimed. We couldn't see the body of it in the darkness, but the flame beneath it indicated a launch. "The question is," I said, "is it headed for space? Or the Denisovans?" After this meeting, the purpose of which we couldn't understand, we were taken to a large cave system beneath the tower structure. It soon became apparent to us that it was a mine combined with a subterranean prison camp. The conditions were, to say the least, hellish. There were hundreds of cells carved out in the bedrock, covered with prison bars, some of them filled with 4 to 5 people. They were all wearing yellow overalls, just like us, which made my heart sink to my stomach. "Denisovans," Alex whispered. He was right. Most of the prisoners weren't Neanderthals. They looked at us with what looked like confusion in their eyes as we walked past the cells. It was dark, the only light coming from small lamps hanging from the lines in the ceiling. And it smelled of burnt rubber, tobacco, and excrements. Prisoners walked in columns, while cloaked Neanderthal men whipped them from behind, ordering them to move forward. They were all carrying shovels, pickaxes, hammers, chisels, and pans. "Do you think they're done with us now?" I said. "Do you think this is where we'll end up? They have seen the proof. They know about our world. Either they might try to reach it themselves and discard of us, or they might need us to help them with their mission. I don't know, Lester." They unlocked a cell that had a pretty good view over the mine and pushed us inside. During the night, all we could do was to listen to the echoes of the pickaxes, the whips, and the Denisovan screams. "Poor beings," I said. "I'm sure there's a similar cave in Asia filled with Neanderthals," Alex said. "There's a certain balance here, you know." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Everyone has their corner of the world," he said. "The animals aren't being systematically brought to extinction, and the environment isn't being destroyed. It just took a few Homo sapiens escaping Africa to ruin all of it. We spread like a wildfire." "What happened to us here? I mean, to our species?" "I don't know," Alex said. "Perhaps we never evolved." We talked about this the entire night, until a prison guard came by with some food and water. The food resembled porridge and had no meat in it aside from a few larvae. It was utterly disgusting. We lived like this for about 3 weeks, unable to leave the cell. We had to do our business in a bucket that was emptied once a week. It was as humiliating as it was repulsive. I feared we would die from dysentery. Finally, one of the women from the tower, accompanied by a group of armed prison guards, came down to us. She looked at us with dismay in her eyes although it was difficult to know exactly what emotions the Neanderthals were showing with their expressions. They led us outside. The daylight hurt our eyes, even though it was filtered through a thick mist. We stepped out on a large square beneath the tower. I looked up and saw the structure, completely black, disappear into the fog above. A group of Neanderthal men, maybe 50, stood in formation in the middle of the square, while a woman stood in front of them, talking and gesturing. These Neanderthals dressed differently from the ones we had seen so far. They had black metal helmets and were armed with rifles with somewhat shorter barrels. Soldiers, I thought. My God, Alex said as he pointed at the sky. Out of the mist, accompanied by the deep sound of a horn being blown not far from us, a huge airship resembling a pitch-black zeppelin descended. Some of the soldiers spread out and grabbed the lines that were thrown from them and helped it land in the middle of the square. The rest of the soldiers formed two lines next to the entrance of the ship, and their commander placed herself in the middle, ready to welcome the people who had just arrived. We were led forward until we stood behind the commander. It became clear the ship had arrived because of us. Most likely, it was a group of higher-ups that wanted to investigate us by themselves. We looked on with anticipation as the doors opened. Another group of women exited the ship, dressed in red uniforms that looked a bit more decorated than the one we had seen so far, and walked toward us. The commander in front of us saluted them by bowing, as did the soldiers. By reflex, I did the same thing. But Alex remained still. The new group examined us closely. One of them stared Alex down while she grabbed his chin and turned his face left to right. I was scared out of my mind. I couldn't imagine a way out of this. A group of soldiers came out of the airship, joining the others. It was clear that our arrival was considered a high priority, that the security at the site was being enforced. Another black vehicle, this time the size of a bus, drove up to us from an arched opening at the other side of the square. We were forced to enter it, together with the women and 5 soldiers. This time, we could see out the windows. They didn't drive us very far, just to another location on the site. The large dark buildings, including the tower, felt desolated and dismal. Further away, we could see another rocket being moved to the launch pad. Looks like a V2, Alex whispered. Probably a missile. I wonder what the payload is, I said. It's probably not made for mass destruction, Alex said. There aren't any large populations here. Think about it for a second. They've probably never encountered an army of more than 10,000 soldiers. Maybe not even that. They never had their battle of the Somme. Look at their weapons. They aren't automatic. I don't think they've ever had a reason to massacre thousands upon thousands of enemy forces with machine guns, you know? The bus stopped on a metal platform, patrolled by one of the prison guards that descended into the ground. It took us to an underground road, as broad as a highway that was illuminated by dim green lights in the ceiling. The bus drove over a bridge. Tons of water flowed down from above on both sides. The roar of the waterfall was deafening, and the mist rising from underneath engulfed the vehicle. It's amazing how much they've built, Alex said. Using slaves, you can accomplish anything, I said sarcastically. The bus stopped on the other side of the bridge. First, I didn't understand why, since we were still in the middle of the road. But then I noticed the small door to our right side. One of the women got up and pointed at Alex. A confusion came upon his face. A soldier stood up and grabbed his arm, saying something to him we couldn't understand. "Wait, where are you taking him?" I asked naively as they took him off the bus. "Alex! Alex!" "It's okay," Alex yelled. "They won't harm us. We're too valuable. You know where I'm being held. Find me." He was halfway out when he finished his sentence. I put my hands on the window as I watched him enter the room with him. "Alex!" I yelled, and then I whispered to myself,
Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. I did my best to memorize everything I saw, and in what order I saw it, so I could find my way back to that door. Further down the road, a group of Denisovan slaves had to step aside to let the bus pass. Their faces were covered with soot and sweat. 10 minutes later, the bus entered a smaller road, blocked by a road boom barrier that opened after one of the soldiers stepped outside and pulled the lever. The road ahead was a downward spiral that led to what looked like the garage from earlier, except this one was guarded by soldiers. Why had I been taken to such a secure location when Alex was taken to a small anonymous room? I couldn't figure it out. But my gut told me it wasn't a good sign. After going down a few floors with an elevator, I was brought to what looked like a scientific facility. The walls were white here, rather than the typical gray, and a lot of the personnel wore red protective masks. They placed me in a small chamber, dressed me down completely, and washed my malnourished body with a large hose. The cold water made my body shudder and numb. When they were done, they set me down on top of an examining table in another room. My teeth chattered against each other. I felt hopeless and began to cry. The last time I cried was when my girlfriend broke up with me in 7th grade. The Neanderthals took a step back when they saw me bawl my eyes out. One of the researchers took a cotton swab and collected some of my tears. They checked all the basics: my reflexes, my heart, my ears, my eyes, and, embarrassingly enough, my genitals. Aside from the last part, it wasn't much different from a checkup at the doctor's office. The officers consulted with the researchers for a few minutes, and then I was taken to yet another room. It was completely circular. It didn't have prison bars, just a large window made out of enforced glass, but it was clearly a cell. It only contained a bunk bed and a big stool that I soon figured out was a toilet. Luckily, I was able to flush it. As soon as I entered the room, the door was locked behind me. I stepped up to the window. They were all standing on the other side, watching me. One of the officers lit a cigarette. A loudspeaker in the ceiling cracked to life, and a voice began speaking. "I can't understand you," I yelled. Of course, they knew that. Most likely, they were only testing the system. I had studied the remains of their species for years, always imagining them in a Neolithic context as troglodytes wielding spears. Now, as they looked down on my naked body, dressed in their fancy uniforms, the tables had turned. Here, I was the prehistoric caveman, reappearing from a long-forgotten past. The food they gave me here was a little better than the food we were given before. It was mostly vegetarian, although sometimes it contained meat. Perhaps mammoth. But I didn't like it that much. It was, according to my standards, undercooked. I was kept inside this room for a long time, constantly monitored. Every day followed the same routine. First, they tested my physical durability and strength, trying to determine my limits. Then they tested my cognition with different kinds of problem-solving tests, similar to standard IQ tests. And lastly, they interrogated me with different methods. The most successful way to communicate was by drawing. I wasn't a very skilled painter, but I was still able to explain certain basic concepts. I did try to learn as much as I could about their language during this time though. I was even given a lexicon, but it was extremely difficult. I couldn't understand more than a few words, signs, and names. I had some success in translating their numerical system. The main difference was that they didn't use the decimal system, but the duodecimal system. Their objectives with communicating with me seemed to be able to understand the technology we had brought with us and where we came from. They always gave me our phones,
both mine and Alex's, and instructed me to explain. Their batteries had died, which they seemed to understand, but they didn't believe me when I claimed to be ignorant about how to charge them up again. I did, however, draw communication satellites orbiting a globe, and although that was beyond their current level of technology, the idea didn't seem completely alien to them. If anything, they seemed rather impressed by it, as if they had just begun to think about such things themselves. As to my place of origin, I deliberately lied to keep them from blocking the passage for me in case I would be able to escape later on. Interestingly enough, they never resorted to torture. They appeared to care a lot about my health, even though I was still losing weight at an alarming rate. One day, during one of the interrogations, they showed me black and white photographs of fossils. On one of them, there was a skull. It had belonged to an anatomically modern Homo sapien. The interrogator put a world map on the table and pointed to an area in East Africa. I nodded and inspected the region more closely than I had done before. To my surprise, I noticed a pair of large lakes, but still tiny on the map, in the vicinity of what would have been Tanzania in my world. First, I didn't think much of it. But after I returned to my room later, I thought about them a great deal. They didn't belong there. I couldn't be entirely sure, because I didn't have a perfect picture of the world map in my head. But I became more or less convinced that those lakes weren't part of my world. Perhaps, I thought, they were the point of divergence. Maybe they were craters. Something must have hit us in this world before we had time to leave Africa, I thought, but after the ancestors of the Neanderthals did. I opened my eyes and said out loud, "My God, we went extinct." After a month or two, I hadn't learned how their calendar worked, so I'm not sure what unit of time they would have used. The doors opened in the middle of the night. I could see the silhouettes of the researchers and officers on the other side of the window. A red light lit them from behind, and the shadow of a cigarette smoke rose to the ceiling. A small, dark figure entered the room. A loud voice came from the speakers. It wasn't speaking to me, but to the figure that had just come inside my room. My heartbeat went into overdrive, and I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. I hid under my covers as the figure stepped into the red light coming from the window. I saw that it was a girl. Given how much smaller she was compared to the other women, and how youthful she looked, it became clear to me that she was a teenager, not older than 16 years old. It didn't take long for me to understand what was going on. Their reproductive ethics were nothing like my own. I quickly got up from the bed, covering my naked body with the covers, and walked over to the window. "You can't do this," I yelled, banging on the glass with both of my hands. "Get her out of here, please." It was hopeless. I tried to open the door, but it was locked as usual. The girl hid away in a corner when she saw me, and I hid away at the other end of the room. The speaker kept talking, and after a few minutes, the Neanderthal girl tried to approach me. She slowly walked toward me, but as soon as she came too close, I quickly ran to the other side of the room. Was she forced somehow? Perhaps they threatened her family? Or had she volunteered out of honor? It didn't matter. I was being forced. They had tested my abilities, compared my hereditary potential to their own, and decided to mix their species with mine to create a superior being. Perhaps to finally outcompete the Denisovans. "You don't understand," I yelled. "It's a mistake. You're dooming yourself into oblivion." I didn't know how to explain it so that they could understand. I kept running away from the girl as soon as she came close. In the morning, when the lights turned on, I could see her more properly. She was wearing thin fabrics, revealing her naked body underneath, and her hair was black. She looked sad, but there were no tears in her big eyes. Her rapid breathing made it clear to me that she was just as afraid as I was, if not more. They didn't feed me, nor the girl this day. I began to cry for the second time in this place. They knew what they were doing. No food or water, until... Realizing this, the futility of it all, I once more banged on the window. "She's a child, goddammit!" My voice echoed into nothingness. The Neanderthal commander lit a cigarette. According to these people, I had to assume it didn't matter how young the girl was, as long as she was fertile. I refused. For 3 days. Both the girl and I was dying of thirst. Most likely, they wouldn't let me die, but I was pretty sure they would sacrifice her. In the end, I couldn't let that happen. During the 3 days, I tried to communicate with the girl. Of course, we didn't understand each other, but we did learn each other's names. Her name was Dura. I cried for the 3rd time during the act. I shut my eyes and tried to imagine something, someone else. But, of course, there wasn't any pleasure. All I felt was anger toward my captors that silently watched us. On the 4th day, they came inside and got the girl. I tried to tell her I was sorry, and although she didn't understand my words, I think she understood. The next day, I was given a pretty substantial meal. This time, they even added fruits. They looked alien to me, but I wasn't surprised by that. Most fruits I was used to had been domesticated, cultivated for millennia by humans. It was natural for another hominid species to do it differently than us. There was a bitter taste to most of the fruits, but it was still an improvement to what I've been given so far. Several months passed. I did my best to forget about Dura, constantly trying to convince myself that I didn't have a choice. The endless examinations and interrogations continued. From time to time, new officers and researchers arrived to pick my mind. I always complied. Occasionally, I tried to ask them about the whereabouts of Alex, but without success. Each time they took me to the examination room, I tried to find weaknesses in their security. I counted the guards, the doors, and tried to come up with a plan to escape. But in my weakened condition, and given their superior physical strength, I didn't have a chance. I slowly gave up, crying myself to sleep every night. But one of those nights, everything changed. I was awakened by the sound of a gunshot. Someone screamed. And then there was another gunshot. Everything went silent for a minute. I sat up and tried to listen. Nothing. All I heard was my frozen breath. Then the door to my room opened. A heavily cloaked and veiled figure appeared. "Who's there?" I asked. The figure grabbed my arm. I tried to fight it off, but then I saw who it was. It was Dura. She wanted me to come with her. Although I was confused about what was going on, my instinct immediately told me to take this opportunity. I covered my body with the bedclothes and followed her down the corridor. She was wearing one of the soldiers' guns. I had no idea how she got her hands on it, but given the circumstances, it was clear to me that she had escaped somehow. A researcher, shot to death, lay in a pool of blood on the floor. Dura was quick. Although I could only see her eyes under her hood, I could tell she was determined and that her life depended on her success in this attempt. As to why she had chosen to save me, if that was what she was doing, I had no idea. She had stolen some kind of card and opened door after door. She stopped and signaled me to do the same. Around the corner, I could hear radio chatter. Dura shut her eyes for a few seconds. Then she loaded the rifle in a swift motion and stepped around the corner. and pulled the trigger. Shit, I whispered to myself as I followed Dura around the corner. The guard was shot in the head, right between the eyes, and blocked the door to the elevator that had brought us to this place. She picked up the rifle, checked if it was loaded, and gave it to me without hesitation. It was heavy, but that might just have been because of my weakened condition. As soon as Dura pulled the lever to the elevator, an alarm sounded and red light filled the corridor. Her escape must have been reported now. Just before the platform descended, a group of guards came running towards us. Luckily, this elevator had a roof which made it impossible for them to shoot down at us from above. Dura reloaded her rifle again, and when we approached the bottom floor, the garage, she sat down and pointed the rifle in front of her. She gestured toward me, seemingly telling me to sit down behind her. I was too afraid, or too frantic, to use the rifle in my hand. I just covered behind her. The alarm echoed through the garage. 4 guards waited for us a few meters away. Dura immediately shot one of them and ran to the right. I followed. The other 3 guards yelled and began chasing us. They both fired upon us, but missed, or perhaps more likely chose not to hit me because they wanted me alive. I turned around and fired my rifle, holding it to my belly, hitting one of the guards in the leg. It was pure luck. I hadn't aimed at all. Dura stopped next to one of the cars, shut the door handle with her rifle, and entered it. I sat down next to her. I could see more guards exit the elevator. However, as Dura drove off, ramming the road barrier, the guards didn't try to come after us. I hyperventilated as Dura sped up to almost 100 miles per hour. The engine rumbled and roared like an angry beast. Dura steered to the side, and half a second later, a group of Denisovan slaves swished past us. They were walking in the middle of the road. Next, I saw the door to the room where they had taken Alex. I yelled for Dura to stop, pointing at the side of the tunnel. She looked at me confused. We didn't have any time to stop. I felt like I betrayed my friend, but I didn't have a choice. Most likely, I thought, they had taken him somewhere else by now anyway. We came upon the bridge from earlier. The sound of the falling water drowned the sound of the raging engine of the car. Dura hit the brakes hard. I almost flew through the windshield. We spun out of control on the wet, slippery road, and then, in an instant, came to a full stop. Dura stepped out on the road. I didn't understand what was happening until I got out. The water vapor formed such a thick mist around us that it was difficult to breathe. And behind all that mist, on the other side of the bridge, I saw it. A barricade had been set up to stop us. Dura stood in front of me, her rifle over her shoulder, and stared at the shadows behind the mist. We couldn't go back from where we had come. I had no idea how we would get out of this situation. Dura didn't share my uncertainty. She turned around and walked toward me with assertive steps. I was confused, scared, and ready to give up. But Dura still seemed to know exactly what she was doing. She grabbed my hand, said something I couldn't understand, and dragged me to the ledge of the bridge. Without hesitation, she climbed up on it. I looked around. The cars on the other end of the bridge started their engines. They knew what was going on, and so did I, even though I didn't want to believe it. I climbed up next to Dura. I took her small hand in my own and looked her in her eyes. And then we jumped. We resurfaced inside of a warm underground pool. I climbed out of the water and helped Dura, who couldn't swim with all her thick clothes, on shore. She still had her rifle, but I lost mine. A blue, ultraviolet light shone down on us from the ceiling. I froze in my place as I looked around. The room, reminiscent of a Turkish bath, was filled with naked Neanderthal women. They laid spread out on carved rocks or floated around on their backs in the water, smoking long pipes. After a few seconds,
I noticed that they didn't care about us. They were high out of their minds from whatever they were smoking. An opium den, I said to myself in disbelief. Dura, now limping on her left leg, began walking. One of the women grabbed her leg with a weak grip. Dura pointed her rifle at her and pulled the trigger with no hesitation. But nothing happened. The ammunition must have been ruined under the water. She turned the rifle around and hit the woman in the head with it. No one reacted. There were a set of red clothes on the wall. Dura pointed at them. I put them on and covered my face. It wouldn't fool anyone for long, but maybe it would buy me a few extra seconds. We sneaked up on the flight of stairs and entered an empty corridor. We turned the corner just to find another empty corridor. Then we walked up another set of stairs and entered a third equally empty corridor. It was a maze. From time to time, we passed a few civilians or workers who weren't on duty. They didn't seem to know who we were. Probably I had been kept a secret to everyone except a selected few. We stepped into a long hallway with armed guards at the other end. Both walls had rows of hollowed-out, barred alcoves filled with Denisovian prisoners, all of them yelling and wailing. From what I could tell, they had been recently captured and their spirits weren't entirely broken yet. The guards shouted at us as they saw us. One of them picked up his radio from his belt and yelled something into it. We tried going back but stopped in our tracks as we heard more guards coming from that direction. Once again, we were trapped. The guards on the other end were joined by a group of soldiers that began walking through the hallway towards us. We didn't have anything to defend ourselves with. I was sure this was it, the end of our futile attempt at escaping. Dura, too short to reach it, pointed at what looked like a set of controls on the wall. At first, I didn't react, not because it was difficult to understand, but because I was too stressed to think. Dura shouted at me. I snapped out of my paralysis and grabbed the biggest lever on the panel, but Dura kept trying to tell me something. I was doing it wrong somehow. I had to stop, look at the panel and think. An almost impossible task. Next to the lever, there were sets of metal switches. Without thinking about what they could be, I began flipping all of them in a frantic motion. Dura leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes. It was time to pull the lever. Although all of this happened in less than a minute, it felt like an eternity. I thought the lever was stuck at first, but it was only I who was weaker than I had ever been before. The soldiers started running towards us and even fired at me. They probably didn't follow their orders, given that they had avoided firing at me before, but rather acted out of fear of what I was doing. The bullets bounced off the walls next to my head. I screamed, grabbed the lever with my other hand, as well as used my body weight to pull it down. It worked. I had no idea what would happen, but I did not have to wait long to find out. The cells, represented by the switches, opened up, and the prisoners leached out and turned on their tormentors. In the chaos that followed, Dura took me by the hand and sneaked past everything. In the middle of the hallway, close to the door, there was a ventilation shaft. Dura grabbed a rifle from a soldier being attacked by a Denisovan and kicked open the shaft. We crawled inside. The echo from the screams faded away as we went forward. The air flowing through it was ice cold. After some time, we passed above a room where two researchers examined something on a large round table. I stopped and looked down the air vent. Alex? The researchers looked up at me. Their mouths were covered with surgical masks. My heart dropped to my feet. Alex's naked body was strapped to the table, like a macabre version of the Vitruvian Man. His head was missing. Dura, who crawled in front of me, gestured to me to continue. I had no choice but to comply. My God, he's dead, I whispered, trying to hold my tears back. Maybe he had died by mistake. Or they had chosen to examine his body while they focused on my mind. A numbness came over me.
It suppressed my panic. My best friend was dead. I heard his words like an echo inside my head as I kept going. There's a certain balance here, you know? We crawled, climbed, and jumped down to different floors. My hands turned freezing cold from the metallic surface, then red, then numb, hard and pale. If I didn't get out of here soon, I would get frostbite. When we finally did get out, we found ourselves inside of the mine. The slaves didn't do anything to stop us. In fact, they acted as they were afraid of us. I felt for them while we ran past them, trying to find our way up to the surface. Their misery knew no limits. Their only crime was belonging to the wrong species, which apparently lay outside of the Neanderthals' circle of empathy. I wondered what life was like in the heart of the Denisovan civilization. The Neanderthal slave drivers, snapping with their long black whips, luckily didn't seem to have been informed about us. We walked on a narrow path. On our right, the miners were hacking away at the bedrock with their heavy pickaxes. And on our left, a deep cliff revealed a dark canyon that must have been carved out by the miners for over a century or more. Slowly, our skin got covered in black grime. One breath felt like smoking an entire pack of cigarettes. On the other end of the chasm, armed soldiers, talking into their radios, shone light from flashlights in the face of everyone to see if it was us. Dura kept going without any sign of giving up, but I couldn't tell if she knew where she was going. All I could tell was that we kept walking upward. After some time of constant walking, she stopped. A deep rumbling noise followed, seemingly coming from the surface. And 1 second later, a few stalactites fell into the abyss from above. It was a rocket launch, I figured, meaning we were finally close to the surface now. Dura remained still for a moment, as if she were contemplating in what direction to go next. Then she said something to me, and went on. We came to a couple of circular stairs. They were cramped and dark, but extending far up from the bottom. Slowly, while I kind of hunched behind her, Dura ascended the stairs. Somewhere in the middle, we heard some radar chatter a few meters further up. It felt like my heart stopped. I held my breath. Dura sat down and checked if her rifle was loaded. Then she pointed it in front of her. The soldier above us must have heard us as well, because he expected us when he came down. He pressed himself against the wall like a shadow. He shot first, but only by a fraction of a second. The sound of the guns was amplified in the staircase. I felt a sting of pain in my shoulder. I was hit. The soldier, with his large hand on his chest, fell down. I touched my shoulder. The bullet had gone right through it, piercing me. Strangely, the pain didn't bother me that much. But that was probably just due to the cold and my shock. For the second time since I arrived here, my eyes had to get used to the daylight after being exposed to nothing more than dim lights for a long time. It looked like we had exited through an emergency exit that wasn't in much use. The tower lay maybe a mile away. This was closer to the launching pad. That was lucky. The area had been evacuated right before the latest launch. Loud sirens blasting a deep and eerie sound could be heard from the tower. They were in a state of red alert, all because of our escape. 2 airships hung in the air with a thin layer of snow on top of them. I looked around. It wasn't summer anymore. A few meters away, there was a parking lot. It was empty, except for a truck. The guard in the staircase must have arrived in it. It was of the same type as the ones the hunters had used. Dura climbed inside. It made sense. We wouldn't have gotten far by foot. However, the road led right through the site. She started the engine, just barely reaching down to the paddles. She gave me the rifle. This was it, the only way out. Soldiers were already approaching. They fired at us, but as soon as we reached full speed, there wasn't much they could do but to watch us race past them. The large truck almost fell over, balancing on the left side as Dura took a sharp curve next to the tower.
I pointed the rifle out of the window to my right and fired at a couple of soldiers entering 3 cars that resembled black Ferraris from the 80s. But I didn't hit any of them. We smashed right through the gate that led out of the site while the guards jumped away from it. Thankfully, no one seemed too eager to shoot to kill, which made our escape a lot easier than it otherwise would have been. The 3 cars followed us silently. This was the same road the hunters had taken us to after they had captured Alex and I. I kept my eyes open for the hill we had climbed. Would I be able to get back? I had lost a lot of weight since I got here, and would probably fit inside the opening by now, and Dura was definitely small enough. I wasn't about to leave her in this hostile place. Not after she helped me escape. A woolly rhino, amazing to see even in my present condition, stood on the road in front of us. Dura ignored it and kept driving right at it at full speed. She looked at it with determination in her eyes. I was getting nervous. "What are you doing?" I said. "Turn left." I began to point my hand to try and make her understand. She didn't listen. I even tried to turn the steering wheel, but she pushed me away with a forceful growl. And then, only a second or less away from hitting the rhino, she sharply steered to the left. I fell to the side. Dura had known exactly what she was doing. Behind us, there was a loud crash. I peeked out of the window. Our pursuers hadn't seen the rhino and smashed right into it. A fatal frontal collision. The leading car was flying in the air, landing on its roof, and the others rolled over. Dura's decision to sacrifice the rhino, now lying dead on the road, had hopefully bought us the time we needed. "Holy shit," I said, and relaxed a little for the first time since we escaped. I put my hand on my shoulder. It had begun to hurt much more now. Dura took her eyes off the road for a second. When she saw the pain in my face, she looked genuinely concerned. There was a stillness on the road. The moon, a moon with no footsteps on its surface, could faintly be seen against the blue sky, and the sun was soon about to set. It was dusk when I saw the hill. "Stop!" I yelled, and pointed at it. I tried to say a few words in her language to make her understand. She seemed confused, but eventually stopped the truck. There was no time to lose. I pointed at myself and then toward the hill. Then I grabbed her arm and made her follow into the deep forest. We plodded through the snow, almost drowning in it. It would be easier for the soldiers to follow our tracks. I looked back at the road. 2 black spots could be seen in the sky, slowly growing larger. The airships. They were coming for us. I had to find the cave fast, but after all this time, it was difficult to remember exactly where I was. Soon, it would be completely dark. We climbed the hill and went down on the other side. This was close. 15 minutes later, I found it. There was no snow near it, as if it had been melted away due to the hotter air coming out of it. Dura, understandably confused, looked at the small entrance. My arm ached and my entire body was shivering. If I didn't get back to my world soon, I would die of hypothermia. To fit in the opening, and especially the second opening inside, we had to take off as much of our clothes as possible. I tried to communicate this to Dura, but I'm not sure how successful I was. I began taking off her heavy cloaks and capes that she had used to blend in with the guards, while I pointed at the entrance. She just stood there, looking at me with the saddest expression I've ever seen. Her cheeks were red from the cold, and her large nose runny. Her clouded breath was rapid, revealing her fear. When one of the large garments fell off her body, her eyes fell on her belly, and as I looked down on it, I saw why. She was heavily pregnant, carrying our child. There was no way for her to enter the second entrance in that condition. "No, no, 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 no," I whispered as I began to cry. A million thoughts went through my head. I knew the airships were getting closer for every second. They hadn't seen us yet. It was imperative that they didn't find, or at least took special notice of the cave. I put Dura's clothes back on her. There was no escape for her. She was going to get caught. And I was too scared, too weak. This moment is the one I'm the most ashamed of. She had gone through all of this, trying to save the father of her child and herself. Even though, and maybe because, she was pregnant. And I didn't have the guts to stay at her side in this defining moment. I pointed to the right, tears running down my cheeks, and told her to go in that direction. And then I pointed at myself in the cave. After that, I tried to make her understand that she couldn't tell the soldiers about it. I did this by using a few words in her language that I had learned, and by pointing at the cave, then making the hush sign with my finger. There was no way for me to know if she understood what I meant. I could only hope. Perhaps she thought she would meet up with me on the other side of the cliff. I don't know. But after I yelled at her, she did as I said and walked away. Luckily, the lack of snow outside the cave meant we didn't leave any prints for the soldiers to discover. The only thing I heard as I crawled through the small passage was the echoes of my weeping. I've returned to the cave once a month, and there hadn't been any signs of anyone coming out of it. I've put a large boulder in front of the entrance that can't easily be moved from the inside, and I've leaned some heavy sticks against it to see if anyone moves it. So far, it seems like Dura kept the cave a secret. Oh, Dura. By now, if she survived, my child is 1 year old. Not a day has gone by without me thinking about them. I regret my decision to return to my world without her. But during this year, I've been keeping myself busy. On the table behind me right now, there are a few things that were very difficult to get a hold on. A bunch of automatic rifles and semi-automatic pistols, tons of ammo for them, grenades, a rocket launcher, and a lot more. I'm going back. This time, I'll be ready. I'm going to show them the true nature of Homo sapiens. They won't know what hit them. I'll give them hell.